The day Evelyn Mercer's life changed forever started like every other miserable day in Black Hollow Ridge, with her father's fist connecting with her ribs before the sun even cleared the mountains. She didn't scream anymore. Screaming only made Harvey Mercer hit harder. Instead, she curled against the wall of their freezing shack while he stumbled around the kitchen, still drunk from the night before, knocking over empty bottles and cursing her mother's name. Margaret Mercer lay silent in the back room, too weak from consumption to even call out. The sickness had been eating her alive for 2 years now, turning her into a skeleton wrapped in gray skin. "You're 26 years old," Harvey slurred, jabbing a filthy finger toward Evelyn. 26, and not a single man in this godforsaken town wants you. You know what that makes you? Useless. A burden. Your mother's dying because you can't even catch a husband to pay for a real doctor. Evelyn kept her eyes on the floor. She'd learned that lesson early. Never look him in the eye when he was like this.
"I got seamstress work today," she said quietly. "Mrs. Patterson's daughter needs a wedding dress altered." "Seamstress work," Harvey spat on the floor. "Pennies, that's all you bring in. Pennies and shame." He staggered toward the door, grabbing his coat. "I'm going to the trading post. You better have something decent on the table when I get back, or you'll get worse than a couple bruises." The door slammed.
Evelyn waited until his footsteps faded before she allowed herself to breathe. Her hands were shaking as she pressed them against her ribs, checking for breaks. Nothing felt cracked this time. Just bruised, always bruised. She forced herself to stand and walk to the back room where her mother lay. Margaret's eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. She looked like a corpse already. "Evie," she whispered. "I'm here, Mama." "Don't listen to him. You're not worthless." Evelyn smiled, though it hurt. "I know." But she didn't know, not really, because every day in Black Hollow Ridge reminded her that Harvey Mercer was probably right. Sayant. The town itself sat in a valley between two mountain ranges, a frozen frontier settlement built on timber, mining, and cruelty. Winter lasted 8 months out of the year, and people survived by being meaner than the cold. Black Hollow Ridge didn't produce soft people. It produced survivors and predators. Evelyn was neither. She was just the woman people laughed at. At 5'10" and broad-shouldered, she'd never fit the delicate mold frontier women were supposed to occupy. Her hands were rough from years of sewing, her face plain and unremarkable, her body too large for men to find appealing. The town children had nicknamed her Big Evie when she was 12, and the name stuck like tar. Now, at 26, she was invisible to men and pitied by women, which was somehow worse than being hated. She walked through town that morning with her sewing kit tucked under one arm, keeping her head down. Snow crunched under her boots. The wind cut through her threadbare coat like knives. Around her, Black Hollow Ridge buzzed with its usual cold rhythm. Miners heading to the shafts, shopkeepers opening their doors, women gossiping on street corners. None of them looked at her, except to laugh. "There goes Big Evie," someone whispered as she passed the general store. "Poor thing. Even those widowers won't touch her. I heard her father beats her bloody every night." Well, what did she expect? Looking like that? Evelyn kept walking. She'd learned to make herself small despite her size. She hunched her shoulders, avoided eye contact, spoke only when spoken to, apologized for existing. That was survival in Black Hollow Ridge. Mrs. Patterson lived in one of the nicer homes on the west side of town, a 2-story house with real glass windows and a painted fence. Her daughter Caroline was marrying the son of a wealthy cattle rancher in 2 weeks, and the wedding was the social event of the season. Evelyn knocked on the back door. A housekeeper opened it, looked her up and down with thinly veiled disgust, and gestured her inside without a word. The kitchen was warm, almost too warm. Evelyn's fingers tingled as blood returned to them. "Wait here," the housekeeper said. Evelyn stood in the corner like a piece of furniture while the household moved around her. She could hear laughter from the parlor, women's voices high and bright, the kind of laughter she'd never been part of. Finally, Mrs. Patterson swept into the kitchen with Caroline trailing behind her. Both women were dressed in expensive wool dresses, their hair perfectly styled. They looked at Evelyn the way you'd look at a stray dog. "Evelyn," Mrs. Patterson said, not bothering with pleasantries. "The dress is upstairs. It needs to be taken in at the waist and shortened by 2 inches. Can you manage that?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good." I need it finished by Friday. Don't be late. Caroline wrinkled her nose. Does she have to work here? She smells like, I don't know, poverty. Mrs. Patterson didn't even scold her daughter. She just sighed. Go upstairs and show her the dress, Caroline. And Evelyn, use the back stairs. I don't want you tracking snow through the house. Evelyn followed Caroline upstairs, her cheeks burning. The dress was beautiful, ivory silk with lace sleeves and pearl buttons down the back. It probably cost more than Evelyn's family made in a year. Don't ruin it, Caroline said as Evelyn carefully examined the stitching. This dress came all the way from St. Louis. If you so much as snag the fabric, my mother will have you thrown in jail. I'll be careful. Caroline studied her with cruel curiosity. Is it true your father drinks away all your money? Evelyn didn't answer. It must be awful, Caroline continued, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. Being so unmarriageable. I mean, even the ugliest girls in town found someone eventually. But you? I can't imagine what that must feel like. Evelyn's hands tightened on the dress. I heard William Tate tried to court you once, Caroline said. Back when you were younger. But even he gave up. That's saying something, considering William's as dumb as a post. I need to take measurements, Evelyn said quietly. Caroline laughed. Of course. Don't let me distract you from your little sewing project. She left Evelyn alone in the room. Evelyn stood there for a long moment, holding the beautiful dress, feeling the weight of every cruel word pressing down on her chest. Then she got to work. Because that's what she always did. She survived. Buzz. By the time Evelyn finished taking measurements and headed back into town, the afternoon sun was already sinking behind the mountains. The temperature dropped fast this time of year. She pulled her thin coat tighter and hurried toward the trading post to pick up thread before heading home. Mercer's trading post sat in the center of town, a large, drafty building that sold everything from flour to ammunition. It was owned by a distant cousin of her father's, which meant Evelyn was allowed inside but treated like a thief the entire time. She pushed through the door, and warmth hit her face. The store was crowded. Men clustered around the stove, smoking and swapping stories. Women examined bolts of fabric near the counter. Children darted between displays, shrieking. Evelyn kept her head down and moved toward the thread display. That's when she heard the laughter. It started near the front of the store and spread like wildfire. People turned, craning their necks to see what was happening. Someone whistled. Someone else let out a loud guffaw. Evelyn glanced up and froze. A man stood near the entrance, staring down at his boot with an expression of pure annoyance. He was tall, taller than most men in town, with broad shoulders and a scarred face that looked like it had been carved out of stone. His clothes were rough, fur-lined coat, leather gloves, boots caked in mud and snow. He looked like he'd walked straight out of the mountains, which Evelyn realized he probably had. Gideon Vale, someone whispered nearby. The name sent a ripple through the store. Everyone knew about Gideon Vale, the mountain ghost, the war scout who vanished into the Iron Fang Mountains 7 years ago and only came back to town once or twice a year for supplies. Rumors said he'd lost his wife and son to sickness. Other rumors said he'd gone half crazy from grief. Some people claimed he'd found a hidden silver mine up in those peaks and was richer than anyone in the territory. No one knew for sure. He didn't talk to people. He just appeared, bought what he needed, and disappeared again. Now he stood in the middle of Mercer's trading post, staring at his right boot, which had split clean open along the sole. "Looks like the mountain man's falling apart," someone shouted. Laughter exploded. Gideon didn't react. He just crouched down, examining the damage. That's when Evelyn saw the problem. He'd slipped on a broken floorboard near the entrance, one of the boards her father's cousin had been meaning to fix for months, and the impact had torn his boot wide open. "Guess even legends can't walk straight," another man called out. More laughter. And then, like a viper smelling blood, Helena Crow appeared. Helena was everything Evelyn wasn't. Beautiful, elegant, manipulative. She was a widow in her late 30s who'd been hunting for a new wealthy husband ever since her first one died and left her with a crumbling estate. She dressed in expensive clothes, hosted lavish parties, and smiled like a snake. Now she glided across the store toward Gideon, her expression perfectly calculated. "Mr. Vale," she purred, "what a terrible accident. Are you hurt?" Gideon glanced up at her. His face was unreadable. "I'm fine." "Well, you certainly don't look fine. Helena gestured dramatically at his boot. That's completely ruined. You'll need a new pair immediately. I know an excellent cobbler in town. I'll manage. Helena's smile tightened. Of course you will. A man like you always manages, doesn't he? So strong, so independent. She was laying it on thick, and everyone in the store knew exactly what she was doing. Helena Crow didn't care about Gideon Vale's boot. She cared about his rumored fortune. Gideon stood, clearly done with the conversation. I need to finish my supplies. He turned to walk away and nearly stumbled again on the broken board. The laughter started up again, louder this time. Helena's eyes gleamed. She opened her mouth to offer more help, more false sympathy, more manipulation. And that's when Evelyn moved. She didn't think about it. She just walked forward, knelt down in front of Gideon Vale, and quietly said, "Let me see the boot." The store went silent. Gideon stared down at her. Evelyn kept her eyes on the boot, not his face. I can fix it, temporarily, enough to get you home. You don't have to. I know. She pulled her sewing kit from her bag and got to work. Around them, the store watched in stunned silence. Helena Crow's face twisted with something ugly. The men near the stove exchanged confused glances. Even the children stopped running, because Big Evie, worthless, unmarriageable Evelyn Mercer, was kneeling in the dirt, fixing the boot of the most dangerous man in the territory. Evelyn worked quickly. Her hands were steady despite the weight of all those eyes on her. She reinforced the torn sole with thick thread, stitching it tight enough to hold until he could get a proper repair. It wasn't pretty, but it would work. When she finished, she stood and stepped back. That should hold, she said quietly. Gideon looked at his boot, then at her. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather pouch. He opened it, revealing gold nuggets inside. How much? He asked. Nothing. His eyes narrowed. Everyone wants something. Evelyn met his gaze for the first time. Up close, she could see the exhaustion carved into his face, the grief, the loneliness. Not me, she said. For a long moment, they just stood there. Then Gideon nodded once, turned, and walked out of the store without another word. The silence broke the second the door closed. What the hell was that? Someone muttered. Big Evie trying to trap herself a rich man, another voice sneered. As if someone like him would ever look at someone like her. Helena Crow stepped forward, her expression venomous. How pathetic, she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Throwing yourself at a man who clearly wants nothing to do with you. Have you no shame, Evelyn? Evelyn didn't respond. She just gathered her things and left. But as she walked home through the freezing streets, something strange happened. For the first time in years, she didn't feel quite so invisible. 3 days passed. Evelyn finished Caroline Patterson's wedding dress and delivered it on time. She endured another beating from her father when he came home drunk. She sat with her dying mother and pretended everything was fine. Life continued the way it always did, cold, cruel, and small. Then, on the 4th day, someone knocked on the door of their shack. Evelyn opened it and found Gideon Vale standing in the snow. He looked even rougher up close. His coat was patched in a dozen places. His hands were scarred. His face was hard as granite. You fixed my boot, he said. I did. Why? Evelyn hesitated. You looked like you needed help. Gideon studied her for a long moment. Then he held out the same leather pouch from before. I don't take charity, he said. Neither do I. His jaw tightened. Everyone in this town wants something from me. What do you want? Nothing. That's not an answer. Evelyn sighed. I wanted to help. That's all. You don't owe me anything. Behind her, she heard her father's voice slurring from inside the shack. Who the hell is at the door? Gideon's eyes flicked past her, taking in the broken furniture, the smell of alcohol, the sound of her mother's wet coughing from the back room. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. You live here? He asked quietly. Yes. Harvey stumbled to the door, shoving Evelyn aside. He stared at Gideon with bloodshot eyes. Then recognition hit. You're Gideon Vale, the mountain man. Harvey's face split into a greedy grin. Well, what brings someone like you to my door? Your daughter fixed my boot. Did she now? Harvey glanced at Evelyn with a calculating look that made her stomach turn. Smart girl, real good with her hands. You need anything else fixed, Mr. Vale? You just let me know. We're always happy to help. Gideon's gaze stayed on Evelyn. I'll keep that in mind, he said. Then he turned and walked away. Harvey watched him go, then grabbed Evelyn's arm hard enough to bruise. What did you do? He hissed. Nothing, I just fixed his boot. Don't lie to me, girl. Did he pay you? No. Harvey's grip tightened. You stupid. Do you know who that man is? Do you have any idea how rich he is? I don't care. Well, you should. Harvey released her and started pacing, his mind clearly racing. This is it. This is how we fix everything. You're going to go up that mountain and make him want you. Evelyn stared at him. What? You heard me. I don't care what you have to do. Seduce him, trap him, get him to marry you. I've got debts coming due in 2 weeks, and if I don't pay them, the Blackmore brothers are going to burn this place to the ground with all of us inside. You want your mother to die like that? No, but... Then you'll do what I say. Harvey stepped closer, his breath hot and rancid. You climb that mountain, you make that man fall for you, and you come back with enough money to save this family, or I swear I'll throw Margaret out in the snow myself. Evelyn's blood turned to ice. You wouldn't. Harvey smiled. It was the cruelest thing she'd ever seen. Try me. Kiss. That night, Evelyn sat beside her mother's bed, holding her skeletal hand. Don't do it, Margaret whispered. I have to. He'll kill you, Evie. That mountain, that man. It's not safe. Safer than staying here? Margaret started to cry, dry, rasping sobs that sounded like wind through dead trees. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you got stuck with us. Don't. Evelyn squeezed her hand. You're my mother. I'm not leaving you. Then take me with you. You can't travel. The cold would kill you. Then let me die here. At least you'd be free. Evelyn closed her eyes. I'm not free anywhere, Mama. Not in this town. Not in this life. The next morning, before dawn, Evelyn packed a small bag and slipped out of the house. The Iron Fang Mountains loomed ahead, black and jagged against the pre-dawn sky. She'd never been up there before. No one went up there, except ghosts. And now, apparently, her. The climb was brutal. Snow fell thick and heavy, turning the world into a swirling white nightmare. The trail, if you could even call it that, twisted through narrow passes and along cliffs that dropped into nothingness. Evelyn's hands went numb. Her feet ached, her lungs burned. She kept climbing, because turning back meant watching her mother die. Hours passed. The sun never really appeared, just a pale glow behind the storm clouds. Evelyn lost track of time. She lost track of direction. She just followed the vague path upward, hoping she was going the right way. Then finally, she saw it. A cabin. It sat in a small clearing half buried in snow, smoke rising from the chimney. It looked solid, well built, nothing like the shacks down in town. Evelyn stumbled toward it and pounded on the door. Silence. She pounded again. Mr. Vale, please, I need... The door opened. Gideon stood there, holding a rifle. He stared at her. What the hell are you doing here? He demanded. Evelyn tried to answer, but her teeth were chattering too hard. Gideon swore under his breath, grabbed her arm, and pulled her inside. The warmth hit her like a hammer. She nearly collapsed. Sit, Gideon ordered, shoving her toward a chair near the fire. Don't move. He disappeared into another room and came back with a blanket, which he threw over her shoulders. Then he crouched in front of the fire, poking at the logs. Evelyn sat there, shaking, trying to process what she'd just done. She'd climbed a mountain in a blizzard to find a man she didn't know, because her father told her to. It was insane. Why are you here? Gideon asked again, his voice rough. Evelyn forced herself to speak. My father... He sent me. Gideon's jaw tightened. Of course he did. He thinks... He wants me to... seduce me. Evelyn flinched. Yes. Gideon stood, pacing toward the window. And you agreed to this? He threatened my mother. She's dying. He said if I didn't come, he'd throw her out in the snow. So you risked your own life instead. What else was I supposed to do? Gideon turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. You could have said no.
And let her die? People die, Evelyn, every day.
The bluntness of it stung, but Evelyn didn't look away. Not if I can stop it. Silence filled the cabin. Outside, the wind howled. Finally, Gideon spoke again. You can stay until the storm passes, then you leave. I can't go back empty-handed. Not my problem. Evelyn stood, the blanket falling from her shoulders. I fixed your boot. I didn't ask for anything. I didn't want anything. And now I'm here because my father is a monster and I have no other choice. So don't stand there and act like I'm just another vulture trying to pick your bones. Gideon's eyes narrowed. I'm not, Evelyn continued, her voice shaking. I'm just a woman trying to keep her mother alive. That's it. That's all I've ever been trying to do. For a long moment, Gideon said nothing. Then he walked past her into the back of the cabin. There's a bed in the corner, he called over his shoulder. Use it. I'll sleep out here. Evelyn stood there, stunned. Thank you, she whispered. He didn't respond. The storm raged for 2 days. During that time, Evelyn discovered that Gideon Vale wasn't the savage beast the town made him out to be. He was just broken. The cabin was full of books, leather-bound volumes on history, engineering, even poetry. There were tools everywhere, meticulously organized, and in the back room, the one Gideon never entered, Evelyn found a child's bed, still neatly made, covered in dust. She didn't ask about it, but she understood. On the second night, they sat by the fire together, eating a simple meal of venison and bread. Why did you really come? Gideon asked quietly. Evelyn stared into the flames. I told you, my father, that's why he sent you. I'm asking why you came. She hesitated. Because I thought, maybe if I did this one thing, he'd stop. He'd leave me alone. He'd let me take care of my mother in peace. And you believed that? No, but I didn't have any other options. Gideon nodded slowly. I know that feeling. Do you? He gestured around the cabin. I've been hiding up here for 7 years. You think that's freedom? It's just another kind of prison. Evelyn looked at him. What are you hiding from? Myself. The honesty of it hit her like a punch. They sat in silence for a while. Then Gideon said, Your father's debts. Who does he owe? The Blackmore brothers. Gideon's expression darkened. Those bastards are worse than criminals. They're vultures. They've been stealing land across the territory for years. I know. And you thought coming up here would fix that? I didn't know what else to do. Gideon leaned back, staring at the ceiling. You're going to die if you go back down there. Probably. And your mother? She's dying anyway. Gideon was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Marry me. Evelyn's head snapped toward him. What? Marry me. Not because your father wants you to, because I need someone honest beside me. Someone who won't try to steal everything I have the second I turn my back. You don't even know me. I know enough. You fixed my boot and didn't ask for anything. That's more than anyone else in this godforsaken territory has ever done. Evelyn stared at him. You're serious? Yes. Why? Gideon met her eyes. Because I'm tired of being alone. And you're tired of being invisible. Maybe we can fix that for each other. Evelyn's heart pounded. I won't be property. I don't want property. I want a partner. I won't love you just because you saved me. I don't want your love. I want your honesty. Evelyn exhaled slowly. Then she said, Okay. Gideon blinked. Okay? Yes, I'll marry you. For the first time since she'd met him, Gideon Vale smiled. It was a broken, fragile thing, but it was real. At dawn, the storm finally broke. Gideon saddled his horse, wrapped Evelyn in his fur coat, and rode down the mountain with her seated in front of him. The entire town of Black Hollow Ridge stopped and stared as they entered. Gideon didn't slow down. He rode straight to the courthouse, dismounted, and pulled Evelyn inside. 15 minutes later, they were married. When they stepped back outside, the street was packed with people. Helena Crow stood at the front of the crowd, her face white with fury. Gideon raised his voice so everyone could hear. This is my wife. Anyone who disrespects her answers to me. Then he helped Evelyn onto the horse, climbed up behind her, and rode away. And for the first time in her entire life, Evelyn Mercer didn't feel worthless. She felt dangerous. The ride back through town felt like being dragged through broken glass. Every eye followed them. Every whisper cut. Evelyn sat rigid in front of Gideon on the horse, his fur coat wrapped around her shoulders, his arms steady across her waist to keep her from falling. She could feel the heat of the stairs burning into her back, could hear the hiss of scandal spreading like wildfire through the frozen streets. Did you see that? He actually married her? Big Evie? That can't be right. He must be out of his mind. Gideon's grip tightened slightly. Not enough to hurt, just enough to remind her he was there. They didn't stop at her father's shack. Gideon rode straight past it toward the nicer side of town, where the hotel stood. A 3-story building with actual paint on the walls and glass windows that weren't cracked. Evelyn had never been inside. Places like that weren't for people like her. Gideon dismounted and held out his hand. She took it. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground. 2 days on a mountain and a morning of shock had drained everything out of her. But Gideon's hand stayed firm under her elbow as he guided her up the steps and through the front door. The hotel lobby went dead silent. A well-dressed clerk stood behind the desk, his mouth falling open as Gideon approached. "I need 2 rooms," Gideon said flatly. "The best you have. One for my wife, one for her mother." The clerk blinked. "Your wife? You have a problem with that?" "No, sir, of course not." The clerk fumbled for the registration book, his hands shaking. "How long will you be staying?" "As long as it takes." "Takes for what, sir?" Gideon leaned forward slightly. "Are you going to give me the rooms, or do I need to buy this entire building?" The clerk's face went white. "The rooms. Right away, sir." 5 minutes later, Evelyn stood in a hotel room that was bigger than her entire house. There was a real bed with clean sheets, a fireplace, a window with curtains, a wash basin with soap that actually smelled like lavender instead of lye. She turned to Gideon, who stood in the doorway watching her. "I can't pay for this," she said quietly. "I didn't ask you to." "I don't understand. Why are you doing this?" Gideon stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "Because you're my wife now. That means something to me, even if it doesn't mean anything to you yet." "It means something," Evelyn said. "I just don't know what." He nodded slowly. "Fair enough. Get cleaned up, eat something. I'm going to arrange for your mother to be moved here, and then I'm hiring a real doctor. My father won't let her go." "Your father doesn't have a choice anymore." Gideon turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. Don't leave this room unless I'm with you. This town is about to get ugly, and I need you safe." "Ugly how?" His jaw tightened. "You just became the wife of the richest man in the territory. There are people here who'd kill you for that." Before Evelyn could respond, he was gone. She stood alone in the beautiful room, her heart pounding, trying to process what had just happened. 24 hours ago, she'd been invisible. Now she was married to a ghost, and the whole town wanted her dead. She walked to the window and looked down at the street below. People were gathering, pointing, arguing. She could see Helena Crow standing in front of the general store, her face twisted with rage as she spoke to a group of well-dressed women. Evelyn stepped back from the window. Then she sat on the edge of the bed and started to shake. Not from fear, from something else entirely. For the first time in her life, she wasn't apologizing for existing, and it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. Gideon returned 2 hours later with Margaret Mercer in his arms. Evelyn's mother looked like a skeleton wrapped in rags. Her eyes were sunken. Her breathing rattled. But when Gideon laid her gently on the bed in the second room, Margaret grabbed Evelyn's hand with surprising strength. "What did you do?" she whispered. "I got us out, Mama." "By marrying him?" "Yes." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "You didn't have to." "I did." Evelyn squeezed her mother's hand. "And I'd do it again." A knock sounded at the door. Gideon opened it to reveal a gray-haired man carrying a black leather bag. "This is Dr. Henley," Gideon said. "He's going to examine your mother." The doctor stepped inside, his expression professional but kind. "Let me take a look at you, Mrs. Mercer." Evelyn started to protest. Doctors cost money they didn't have. But Gideon caught her eye and shook his head. "It's handled," he said quietly. She followed him out into the hallway, closing the door behind them. How much is this going to cost?
She asked. Does it matter? Yes. Gideon leaned against the wall, studying her. You really don't know how to let someone help you, do you? I know how. I just don't trust it. Smart. He crossed his arms. Your father showed up while I was getting your mother, tried to demand money, said I owed him for taking his daughter. Evelyn's stomach dropped. What did you do?
Told him if he came near you or your mother again, I'd break every bone in his body. Gideon's voice was calm, but his eyes were hard as stone. Then I paid his debt to the Blackmore brothers. All of it. Evelyn stared at him. Why would you do that? Because now he has no leverage, no excuses. If he hurts you again, it's just because he wants to. And that makes it easier to put him in the ground. The casual way he said it made Evelyn's blood run cold. You'd kill him? Without hesitation. She should have been horrified, should have been afraid. Instead, she felt something else. Relief. He'll come after you, she said quietly. He'll find a way to make trouble. Let him try. The door opened and Dr. Henley stepped out. His expression was grave. She's very ill, he said. Advanced consumption, malnutrition, possible pneumonia. I'm honestly surprised she's still alive. Evelyn's throat tightened. Can you help her? I can make her comfortable, give her medicine for the pain, try to build her strength back up. But I won't lie to you, Mrs. Vale. She's in a bad way. The next few weeks will be critical. Do whatever you can, Gideon said. Money isn't an issue. Dr. Henley nodded. I'll come back tomorrow with supplies. Keep her warm. Make sure she eats, even if it's just broth. And keep her away from stress. After the doctor left, Evelyn sat beside her mother's bed while Margaret slept. Gideon stood by the window, silent and still. Thank you, Evelyn said quietly. For what? For not letting her die in that shack. Gideon didn't respond for a long moment. Then he said, My son died in my arms. I couldn't stop it. Couldn't save him. I've lived with that for 7 years, so if I can stop someone else from dying, I will. Evelyn looked at him. What was his name? Thomas. How old was he? 4. The weight of that single word hung in the air like smoke. I'm sorry, Evelyn whispered. So am I. They sat in silence while the sun sank behind the mountains and darkness filled the room. By morning, the entire town knew every detail. Gideon Vale, the mountain ghost, the war hero, the richest man in the territory, had married Big Evie. Worthless, ugly, unmarriageable Evelyn Mercer. The rumors spread like plague. Some said she'd tricked him, seduced him, trapped him with lies. Others said he'd lost his mind up in those mountains and couldn't tell the difference between a woman and a mule. A few, very few, wondered if maybe Gideon Vale saw something in Evelyn that the rest of them had missed. But those voices were drowned out by the louder, crueler ones. Helena Crow made sure of that. She spent the morning visiting every influential woman in Black Hollow Ridge, pouring poison into their ears with a smile on her face. It's disgraceful, she said to Mrs. Patterson over tea. That man could have had anyone, any respectable woman in this territory, and he chose her? A seamstress with no breeding, no education, no beauty? It's an insult to all of us. Mrs. Patterson nodded eagerly. I always knew there was something wrong with that girl, the way she looked at people, like she thought she was better than everyone else. Exactly. Helena stirred her tea with delicate precision. And now she's going to parade around town like she's royalty. Mark my words, Caroline, this won't end well. Women like that don't belong in our circles. They bring everything down to their level. Caroline leaned forward. Do you think she really seduced him? Up in that cabin? Helena's smile was razor sharp. What else could it have been? Men don't marry women like that out of love. They marry them out of temporary insanity. The women laughed, and the poison spread. By noon, every shop owner in town had heard the story. By evening, even the miners coming off shift were talking about it. The whole territory buzzed with the scandal of Gideon Vale's inexplicable marriage. But Gideon didn't care. He spent the day buying Evelyn things she'd never owned, dresses made of real wool, boots that actually fit, a coat lined with fur. He hired a woman to come to the hotel and help Margaret bathe and eat. He arranged for meals to be brought to their rooms 3 times a day, and every time Evelyn tried to protest, he cut her off. "You're my wife," he said simply. "This is what wives get." "I don't need all this." "Maybe not, but you deserve it." The words hit her harder than any of Harvey's fists ever had, because no one had ever said that to her before. No one had ever looked at her and seen something worth protecting. That afternoon, while Margaret slept, Evelyn stood in front of the mirror in her room and stared at herself in one of the new dresses. It was dark green wool with brass buttons and a collar that actually fit. She looked different, not pretty. She'd never be pretty, but she looked solid, real, like someone who mattered. A knock sounded at the door. She opened it to find Gideon standing there with a grim expression. "We need to talk," he said. She stepped aside to let him in. Gideon closed the door and turned to face her. "The Blackmore brothers were in town this morning. They know I paid your father's debt, and they're not happy about it." Evelyn's stomach dropped. "What did they say?" "They didn't say anything. They just watched. But I know their type. They're not going to let this go. Paying off one debt doesn't erase the fact that they've been using your father to leverage other people. And now that leverage is gone." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying they're going to come after us. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But soon." Evelyn sat down slowly. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bring this into your life." "You didn't bring anything. I chose this." Gideon crouched in front of her, his eyes level with hers. "But you need to understand something. The moment you married me, you became a target, not just for the Blackmores, for everyone in this town who wants what I have. Like Helena Crow. Especially like Helena Crow." Gideon's jaw tightened. "She's been circling me for years trying to get her claws in, and now that I've chosen someone else, she's going to make your life hell. She already has." "This will be worse." Evelyn met his eyes. "I've survived worse than Helena Crow." "Have you?" She thought about her father's fists, her mother's slow death, the years of mockery and humiliation. "Yes," she said firmly. "I have." Gideon studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Good, because what's coming isn't going to be a fair fight. These people don't play fair." "Neither do I. Not anymore." Something flickered in Gideon's eyes, almost like approval. He stood and walked to the window. "There's something else you should know. I'm not a good man, Evelyn. I've done things. In the war, in the mountains, things I can't take back. I'm telling you this now because I need you to understand what you married. I'm not a hero. I'm just a man who's too tired to keep running." Evelyn stood and walked over to him. "I don't need a hero. I just need someone who won't hit me." Gideon turned to look at her. "I will never hit you," he said quietly. "That's a promise." "Then that's enough." They stood there in silence, two broken people staring out at a town that wanted them destroyed. Finally, Gideon said, "Get some rest. Tomorrow I'm taking you into town. If we're going to survive this, people need to see that I'm not ashamed of you." "Are you?" He looked at her with those hard, tired eyes. "No," he said. "I'm not." And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, Evelyn believed him. The next morning, Gideon took Evelyn to the dressmaker. Not just any dressmaker, the best one in town. The one who made gowns for wealthy ranchers' wives and daughters of mine owners. The one who had never once acknowledged Evelyn's existence despite Evelyn doing alterations for half the women who shopped there. Madame Rousseau's shop sat on the corner of Main Street, all polished wood and expensive glass. Evelyn had walked past it 1,000 times. She'd never been inside. Now Gideon held the door open for her. The shop went silent as they entered. Madame Rousseau stood behind the counter, a tall, elegant woman with silver hair and a permanent expression of disdain. She looked at Evelyn the way you'd look at a rat. "Mr. Vale," she said coldly. "How unexpected." "My wife needs a wardrobe," Gideon said flatly. "Evening gowns, day dresses, whatever she needs to attend social functions." Madame Rousseau's eyes flicked to Evelyn. "I see. Well, I'm afraid I'm quite busy at the moment. I'll pay triple your usual rate." Madame Rousseau's mouth snapped shut. Money apparently spoke louder than snobbery. "Of course," she said stiffly, "right this way." For the next 2 hours, Evelyn stood while Madame Rousseau and her assistants measured every inch of her body with expressions of barely concealed disgust. They spoke to Gideon, not to her. This will be difficult, Mr. Vale. Her proportions are unusual. She's built like a working woman, not exactly fashionable. We'll do our best, of course, but I can't promise. You'll make her beautiful, Gideon interrupted. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a knife. Or I'll take my business somewhere else. Are we clear? Madame Rousseau's face flushed. Perfectly clear, Mr. Vale. When they finally left the shop, Evelyn felt like she'd been stripped naked and examined like livestock. I hated that, she said quietly as they walked down the street. I know. Then why did you make me do it? Gideon stopped walking and turned to face her. Because the women in this town are going to judge you no matter what. If you show up in your old clothes, they'll say you're not good enough for me. If you show up in expensive dresses, they'll say you're a gold digger. Either way, they're going to hate you, so you might as well look good while they do it. Evelyn stared at him. You've thought about this a lot. I've been thinking about nothing else since I married you. They kept walking. People stared, whispered, pointed. Evelyn forced herself to keep her head up. They passed the general store, and Helena Crow stepped out onto the boardwalk, blocking their path. She looked beautiful, as always. Perfect hair, perfect dress, perfect smile. All of it fake. Gideon, she said warmly, what a surprise. I've been meaning to come by and congratulate you on your marriage. Have you? Gideon said flatly. Of course. It's such wonderful news. Helena's eyes slid to Evelyn. Though I must say, it was quite a shock. I don't think anyone expected you to marry so quickly or so unexpectedly. Life's full of surprises, Gideon said. Helena's smile tightened. Indeed. Well, Evelyn, you must be thrilled. I imagine this is quite a change from your previous circumstances. Evelyn felt the barb land, but she didn't flinch. It is, she said evenly. I no longer have to listen to women like you pretend to care about my well-being. Helena's expression froze. Gideon made a sound that might have been a laugh. Well, Helena said, her voice like ice, I can see marriage hasn't improved your manners. No, Evelyn agreed, but it did improve everything else. Helena's face went white with fury. She opened her mouth to respond, but Gideon stepped between them. We're done here, he said to Helena. Stay away from my wife. Or what? Helena's eyes flashed. You'll threaten me too? Just like you threatened everyone else who dared to question this ridiculous marriage? No, I'll make sure everyone in this territory knows exactly what kind of woman you really are, starting with the 3 ranchers you swindled out of their land 2 years ago. Helena's face went pale. Gideon leaned in slightly. You think I don't know how you operate? I've been watching you for years, Helena. I know every dirty secret you've buried. So here's some advice. Stay in your lane, or I'll burn your whole life down and enjoy watching it. He stepped back, took Evelyn's arm, and walked away. Helena stood frozen on the boardwalk, her perfect mask finally cracking. Evelyn glanced back once and saw pure hatred in the woman's eyes. You just made an enemy for life, she said to Gideon. I made that enemy the day I married you instead of her. Was she really after you? She's been after me since her husband died. Tried everything. Invitations, gifts, showing up at my cabin unannounced. I turned her down every time. And Helena Crow doesn't handle rejection well. So this is revenge. This is war, Gideon corrected. And she's just getting started. They walked the rest of the way back to the hotel in silence. But Evelyn felt something stirring inside her chest. Not fear, anger. Because for 26 years, she'd let people like Helena Crow walk all over her. Not anymore. That night, while Margaret slept in the next room, Evelyn sat by the window and watched the town below. Gideon sat across from her, cleaning his rifle. Can I ask you something? Evelyn said. Go ahead. Why did you really marry me? Gideon looked up from his work. I told you. I needed someone honest. That's not the whole truth. He set the rifle down and leaned back in his chair. No, it's not. So tell me the real reason. Gideon was silent for a long moment. Then he said, When you fixed my boot, you didn't look at me like I was a fortune. You looked at me like I was a person, and I haven't felt like a person in 7 years. Evelyn swallowed hard. That's it? That's everything. Gideon's eyes were dark and tired. You have no idea how exhausting it is to be seen as nothing but money. Every smile is fake. Every kindness has a price. Every conversation is a transaction. And then you showed up and fixed my damn boot and refused payment, like it was the most normal thing in the world. It was normal. Not here. Gideon shook his head. Not in this town, not in this life. Evelyn looked down at her hands. I'm not what you think I am. I'm not strong or brave or... You climbed a mountain in a blizzard to save your mother, Gideon interrupted. That's the definition of brave. I was terrified the whole time. Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's doing the right thing even when you're scared to death. Evelyn met his eyes. You sound like you're speaking from experience. I am. Tell me. Gideon hesitated. Then he said, I was a scout during the border wars. Spent 3 years sneaking behind enemy lines, gathering intelligence, sabotaging supply routes. I was terrified every single day, but I did it anyway because people were counting on me. And when I came home, I thought the fear would stop, but it didn't. It just changed shape. Into what? Into love. Gideon's voice went rough. I loved my wife, loved my son, and every day I was terrified something would happen to them. And then it did. Sickness took them both in the same week, and I realized the thing I'd been afraid of all along finally happened. So I stopped being afraid. I stopped feeling anything, and I went up that mountain to disappear. Evelyn's throat tightened. What changed? You did. She didn't know what to say to that. They sat in silence while the fire crackled and the town outside slowly went dark. Finally, Evelyn said, I don't know how to be a wife. I don't know how to be a husband anymore. So what do we do? Gideon looked at her across the dim room. We figure it out. Together. Evelyn nodded slowly. It wasn't a love story, not yet, but it was something. And for now, that was enough. Bookie eat. 3 days later, Harvey Mercer came to the hotel. He was drunk, furious, desperate. The desk clerk tried to stop him, but Harvey shoved past and stormed up the stairs, pounding on Evelyn's door. Open this door, he roared. You ungrateful little... The door opened, but it wasn't Evelyn standing there. It was Gideon. Harvey's rage faltered for half a second. Then he pushed forward anyway. You can't keep her from me. She's my daughter. I have rights. Gideon grabbed him by the throat and slammed him against the wall hard enough to crack the plaster. Harvey choked, his eyes bulging. You have no rights, Gideon said quietly. You gave those up the first time you hit her. Now get out of my sight before I throw you through that window. She owes me. She owes you nothing. Gideon tightened his grip slightly. Harvey's face turned red. If I ever see you near her again, Gideon continued, his voice calm and cold, I will kill you. Not threaten, not scare. Kill. Do you understand? Harvey tried to nod. Gideon released him, and Harvey collapsed to the floor, gasping. Now crawl back to whatever hole you came from, Gideon said, and pray I never change my mind about letting you live. Harvey scrambled to his feet and ran. Gideon turned and walked back into the room, where Evelyn stood pale and shaking. You didn't have to do that, she whispered. Yes, I did. He'll come back. He always comes back. Gideon closed the door and locked it. Let him try. Evelyn sat down on the bed, her hands trembling. I thought I'd feel relieved, seeing him afraid for once, but I just feel tired. That's normal. Is it? Gideon sat beside her. You spent your whole life being afraid of him. That doesn't just disappear overnight. When does it disappear? I don't know, but I'll make sure you're safe while you figure it out. Evelyn looked at him. Why do you keep protecting me? Because someone should have been protecting you all along. Something broke inside Evelyn's chest, and for the first time in years she cried. Not quiet tears, loud, ugly, desperate sobs that shook her whole body. Gideon didn't tell her to stop, didn't tell her to be strong. He just sat beside her while she fell apart. And when she finally ran out of tears, he handed her a handkerchief and said, Better? A little. Good, because tomorrow we're going to the Founders' Ball. Evelyn stared at him. What? You heard me, the biggest social event of the year, and we're going. I can't go to that. Those people hate me. I know, that's exactly why we're going. That doesn't make any sense. Gideon stood and walked to the window. If we hide, they win. They get to say you're not good enough, that I'm ashamed of you, that this marriage is a mistake. But if we show up together, if we walk into that ballroom and make them look at you, they have to face the fact that you're not going anywhere. Evelyn's heart pounded. They'll destroy me. They'll try, and we'll destroy them right back. I don't know how to do that. Gideon turned to look at her. Yes, you do. You've been surviving their cruelty your whole life. Now it's time to stop surviving and start fighting. Evelyn took a shaky breath. Then she nodded. Okay, she said, let's go to war. The dress arrived the day before the founder's ball. Madame Rousseau's assistant delivered it personally, her face pinched with disapproval as she hung the garment in Evelyn's room and left without a word. Evelyn stared at it for a long time after the door closed, her stomach twisting into knots. It was deep burgundy silk with black lace at the collar and sleeves. Simple, elegant. Nothing like the fussy, over-decorated gowns most wealthy women wore. It actually looked like something a person could move in. Margaret sat propped up in bed, looking stronger than she had in weeks, thanks to Dr. Henley's medicine and actual food in her stomach. Her eyes filled with tears when she saw the dress. You look like a different person, she whispered. Evelyn turned from the mirror. I don't feel different. You will. Once you walk into that ballroom and show them all what they missed. They didn't miss anything, Mama. They saw exactly what they wanted to see. Then make them see something else. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed and took her mother's hand. What if I can't do this? What if I walk in there and freeze? What if they laugh at me and I just break? Margaret squeezed her fingers with surprising strength. Then you break. And then you get back up. That's what we do, Evie. We break and we get back up. We've been doing it our whole lives. I'm tired of breaking. I know, baby, but this is the last time, I promise you. After tomorrow night, you won't be the woman they can break anymore. You'll be the woman who fought back. Evelyn wanted to believe her. She just didn't know if she could. The Founders' Ball was held every year in the town's largest building, the Miners' Hall, a 2-story structure with crystal chandeliers imported from back east and polished wood floors that cost more than most people's houses. It was where the territory's wealthy class gathered to congratulate themselves on their success, while the rest of the population froze outside. Evelyn had never been inside. Now she stood in front of the mirror in her hotel room, wearing the burgundy dress and trying not to vomit from nerves. Gideon stood behind her, dressed in a black suit that made him look even more dangerous than usual. He'd trimmed his beard and pulled his hair back, but nothing could hide the scars on his face or the cold calculation in his eyes. You ready? He asked. No? Good. Neither am I. Evelyn turned to face him. Then why are we doing this? Because Helena Crow is expecting us to hide. She's expecting you to be too ashamed to show your face. And I'll be damned if I give that woman the satisfaction. What if this makes everything worse? It will make everything worse, Gideon said flatly. But we're doing it anyway. He offered his arm. Evelyn took it. Her hand shook against his sleeve. They walked downstairs and out into the frozen night. A hired carriage waited for them, another one of Gideon's purchases. The driver helped Evelyn inside without meeting her eyes, and then they were moving through the dark streets toward the center of town. Tell me what to expect, Evelyn said quietly. Gideon stared out the window. They'll stare. They'll whisper. Helena will make a scene, probably try to humiliate you in front of everyone. And what do? You stand there and take it. Don't run. Don't apologize. Don't give them anything they can use against you. That's it? Just stand there? Gideon looked at her. You've been standing there and taking it your whole life. The only difference is, this time I'll be standing next to you. And if anyone crosses a line, I'll make sure they regret it. The carriage stopped. Evelyn could see the lights blazing through the windows of Miners' Hall, could hear music and laughter spilling out into the street. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. I can't do this, she whispered. Yes, you can. I'm going to embarrass you. Gideon's jaw tightened. The only way you could embarrass me is by not showing up. Now come on, we're already late. He opened the carriage door and stepped out, then turned and offered his hand. Evelyn looked at it for a long moment. Then she took it. The moment her feet hit the ground, she felt every eye in the vicinity turn toward her. People standing outside smoking, couples arriving in their own carriages. Even the driver went still. Gideon didn't slow down. He kept Evelyn's hand tucked firmly in the crook of his arm and walked straight toward the entrance like he owned the building. The doorman's eyes went wide when he saw them. "Mr. Vale," he stammered. "We weren't expecting— we're honored." "Open the door," Gideon said. The doorman scrambled to obey. And then they were inside. The ballroom was exactly as Evelyn had imagined. Massive, glittering, full of people who looked like they'd stepped out of a painting. Women in silk gowns and jewels. Men in expensive suits. Chandeliers casting golden light across polished floors. A small orchestra playing in the corner. Every single person stopped talking when Gideon and Evelyn walked in. The silence was deafening. Evelyn felt her face flush hot. Her instinct was to look down, to make herself small, to apologize for existing. But Gideon's hand tightened on hers, and she kept her head up. Across the room, Helena Crow stood surrounded by a cluster of elegantly dressed women. Her face went white with fury when she saw them. Then the whispers started. "Is that— It can't be. Big Evie? What is she doing here? Look at that dress. Trying so hard to look like she belongs. Pathetic." Gideon guided Evelyn toward the edge of the ballroom, his expression carved from stone. People parted to let them through, staring openly. "How are you doing?" Gideon murmured. "I want to die." "You're doing great." "I'm not doing anything." "Exactly. Keep it up." They reached a small table near the wall, and Gideon pulled out a chair for her. Evelyn sat, her back rigid, her hands clenched in her lap. Around them, the party slowly resumed. Music started again. Conversations picked up. But the stares didn't stop. Helena detached herself from her group and glided across the floor toward them, her smile sharp as a knife. "Gideon," she said warmly, ignoring Evelyn completely. "What a surprise. I didn't think you attended these sorts of events." "I don't," Gideon said, "but my wife wanted to come." Helena's smile froze. She finally looked at Evelyn, her eyes raking over the burgundy dress with thinly veiled contempt. "How lovely," she said. "Though I must say, Evelyn, you look rather uncomfortable. These events can be so overwhelming for people who aren't used to them." Evelyn forced herself to meet Helena's gaze. "I'm fine." "Are you? You look quite pale. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable outside or back at the hotel." "I'm exactly where I want to be." Helena's eyes flashed. "How brave of you, coming here despite everything people are saying." "What are they saying?" Gideon's voice was quiet and dangerous. Helena's smile widened. "Oh, you know how people talk. They're just curious about the sudden marriage, the unusual circumstances. Some are even wondering if perhaps Evelyn trapped you somehow. A woman in her position, desperate for security." "Careful," Gideon said. "I'm simply repeating what others have said. Don't shoot the messenger." Helena turned back to Evelyn. "Though I suppose I can understand the appeal, marrying a wealthy man must seem like a dream come true for someone like you." Evelyn's hands clenched tighter, her nails digging into her palms. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to apologize, to disappear. But Margaret's voice echoed in her head. "Make them see something else." "You're right," Evelyn said quietly. "Marrying Gideon does seem like a dream. Because for the first time in my life, I'm not being beaten by my father or humiliated by women who think their money makes them better than everyone else. So yes, Helena, it is a dream come true." Helena's face went rigid. Gideon made a sound that might have been a laugh. Several people nearby had stopped talking to listen. The whispers spread like ripples in water. Helena recovered quickly, her smile returning. "Well, how refreshing. Honesty is such a rare quality these days. Though I do hope you understand that marriage is about more than just escaping unpleasant circumstances. It requires a certain refinement, breeding, social grace." "Is that what your first marriage had?" Evelyn asked. "Because I heard your husband drank himself to death to get away from you." The entire room went silent. Helena's face turned white, then red, then white again. Gideon stood slowly. "I think we're done here." "How dare you!" Helena's voice shook with rage. "How dare you speak to me that way? You're nothing but a seamstress, a charity case. You have no right." "I have every right," Evelyn said, standing as well. Her fear was gone, burned away by years of swallowed humiliation finally erupting.
You've spent years treating me like dirt, laughing at me, using me to make yourself feel superior, and I let you. I apologized for existing. I made myself small so you could feel big. But I'm done with that. I'm done with all of it. Helena's hands trembled. You'll regret this, both of you. Do you have any idea who I am? What I can do? I know exactly what you can do, Evelyn said. Nothing. You have no power over me anymore. Helena opened her mouth to respond, and that's when Sheriff Darnell Pike stepped forward. He was a large man with a beard that couldn't hide the cruelty in his face. He'd been standing near the refreshment table, watching the confrontation with interest. Mrs. Vale, he said, his voice carrying across the room, I wonder if I might have a word with you. And your husband.
Gideon's expression hardened. About what? About a complaint that was filed this afternoon, concerning the circumstances of your marriage. The room went dead silent. Evelyn's heart stopped. Pike pulled a folded paper from his jacket. Your father, Harvey Mercer, has alleged that Mr. Vale coerced you into marriage through threats and intimidation. He's requesting an official investigation. My father is a liar, Evelyn said immediately. Perhaps, but the law requires me to investigate all allegations of this nature. Pike's eyes were cold. So I'm going to need you to come down to my office and answer some questions. Now? Gideon asked. Yes, Mr. Vale. Now. Evelyn could feel the entire ballroom watching, waiting to see what would happen. Helena stood off to the side, her expression carefully neutral, but Evelyn saw the gleam of satisfaction in her eyes. This was planned. Helena had orchestrated this entire thing. Fine, Evelyn said. Let's go. Evelyn? Gideon started. No, it's fine. I'll answer his questions. I'll tell him the truth, and then everyone in this room will know exactly what kind of man my father is. Pike smiled. After you, Mrs. Vale. They walked out of the ballroom together, leaving behind a crowd of stunned, whispering guests, and Helena Crow watching with a smile. The sheriff's office was a small, cold room that smelled like tobacco and old coffee. Pike sat behind a scarred wooden desk while Evelyn and Gideon stood in front of him like criminals. Now then, Pike said, opening a notebook. Let's start from the beginning. Mrs. Vale, did your husband threaten you or your family in any way prior to your marriage? No. Did he offer you money in exchange for marrying him? No.
Did he make any promises regarding your mother's medical care that influenced your decision? Evelyn's jaw tightened. He offered to help my mother after we were married. That's not coercion, that's kindness. Pike scribbled something in his notebook. Your father claims Mr. Vale assaulted him 3 days ago. Threatened to kill him if he came near you again. Is that true? My father tried to force his way into my hotel room while drunk, Evelyn said. Gideon stopped him, that's all.
By choking him and threatening his life? By protecting me, Evelyn snapped, which is more than my father ever did. Pike leaned back in his chair. Mrs. Vale, I understand this must be difficult, but I need you to be honest with me. Did Mr. Vale take advantage of your desperate circumstances to coerce you into marriage? Evelyn stepped forward, her hands flat on the desk. Let me be very clear, Sheriff. My father beat me for 26 years. He drank away every penny we earned. He let my mother rot from sickness because he spent the money on whiskey instead of doctors. And when he found out Gideon had money, he tried to sell me like livestock to pay his debts. So when you ask me if Gideon coerced me, the answer is no. He saved me from my father, from this town, from a life of humiliation and abuse. And if you try to take that away from me, I will make sure everyone in this territory knows that you're doing it because Helena Crow paid you to. Pike's face went red. That's a serious accusation. Is it? Because my father doesn't have the money to file legal complaints. He can barely afford food. So who paid for this? Who convinced him to come after us? Pike's eyes flicked to Gideon, then back to Evelyn. I'm conducting a legitimate investigation. You're conducting a witch hunt, Gideon said quietly, and we're done cooperating. If you want to arrest me, do it. Otherwise, we're leaving. Pike stood. I could arrest you for assaulting Harvey Mercer. Then do it. But you better have more than a drunk's word, because my lawyers will tear this case apart, and when they're done, you'll be out of a job. Pike's jaw worked. Then he sat back down. Get out of my office, he said. Gideon took Evelyn's arm and guided her toward the door. "This isn't over," Pike called after them. "Yes, it is," Evelyn said without turning around. "You just don't know it yet." They stepped out into the freezing night. Evelyn's whole body was shaking, but not from cold, from rage. "I want to destroy them," she said quietly. Gideon looked at her. "Who?" "All of them. Helena, Pike, my father, everyone who thought I was too weak to fight back." "Then let's do it." "How?" Gideon was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I know a lawyer, Nathaniel Rowe, best in the territory. If anyone can help us, it's him." "Can we trust him?" "He doesn't work for people. He works for cases. And this case is exactly the kind of thing he lives for." They walked back to the hotel through streets empty and dark. Above them, stars scattered across the black sky like broken glass. "I'm sorry," Evelyn said quietly. "For what?" "For ruining the ball, for causing trouble, for—" "Stop," Gideon interrupted. "You didn't ruin anything. You stood up for yourself. That's not something to apologize for." "It feels like it." "I know, but it shouldn't." They reached the hotel and climbed the stairs to their rooms. Margaret was asleep, her breathing steady and even. Dr. Henley's medicine was working. She looked more alive than she had in months. Evelyn sat on the edge of her bed and stared at the floor. Gideon stood in the doorway. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I spent my whole life being afraid, and I'm tired of it." "Fear is useful. It keeps you alive." "Or it keeps you small." Evelyn looked up at him. "I've been small my entire life. I don't want to be small anymore." Gideon nodded slowly. "Then don't be." "I don't know how." "Yes, you do. You already started tonight." Evelyn thought about Helena's face when she'd fought back, about Pike's frustration when she wouldn't back down. "It felt good," she admitted. "Good. Is that wrong?" "No, it's human." Evelyn stood and walked to the window. Below, Black Hollow Ridge slept under a blanket of snow. It looked peaceful, beautiful even. But she knew the ugliness that lived beneath the surface. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we hire Nathaniel Rowe and we go to war." Nathaniel Rowe arrived in Black Hollow Ridge 3 days later on a horse that probably cost more than most people's houses. He was tall, thin, with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. He dressed like a gentleman but talked like a street fighter. Gideon brought him to the hotel to meet Evelyn. Rowe looked her up and down, then nodded once. "Mrs. Vale," he said, "your husband tells me you have a problem." "Several problems," Evelyn said. Good, I work better with several." He sat down and pulled out a leather notebook, flipping it open to a blank page. "Start from the beginning," he said. "Tell me everything." So Evelyn did. She told him about her father, about the abuse, about the Blackmore brothers and their threats, about Helena Crow's manipulation, about Sheriff Pike's harassment. Rowe listened without interrupting, his pen scratching across the page. When she finished, he looked up. "This is worse than I thought," he said. "Can you help us?" Gideon asked. "Probably, but it's going to get ugly. These people don't just have money, they have connections, influence, and they've been operating unchecked for years." "We don't care how ugly it gets," Evelyn said. Rowe smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous expression. "Good, because I'm going to need you to be willing to fight dirty." "How dirty?" "Public testimony, exposing secrets, making enemies." Rowe leaned forward. "Mrs. Vale, if we do this right, we won't just win. We'll burn their entire operation to the ground. But that means you're going to have to stand in front of a courtroom and tell everyone in this territory exactly what your father did to you, what this town did to you. Are you prepared for that?" Evelyn's hands clenched. "Yes." "Are you sure? Because once we start this, there's no going back. You'll be a target. People will say terrible things about you. They'll try to destroy your reputation, your marriage, everything." "They already are," Evelyn said. "The only difference is, now I'm fighting back." Rowe studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "All right, let's get to work." The first thing Rowe did was file a countersuit against Harvey Mercer for years of domestic abuse and attempted extortion. The second thing he did was request a full investigation into Sheriff Pike's financial records. The third thing he did was subpoena the Blackmore brothers' business dealings for the past 5 years. Black Hollow Ridge exploded. Within a week, everyone in town was talking about the lawsuits. People took sides. Arguments broke out in stores and saloons. Families stopped speaking to each other. And Helena Crow went into hiding. But Roe wasn't done. He started interviewing people. Miners who'd lost land to the Blackmores. Widows who'd been swindled. Ranchers who'd been threatened. One by one, he gathered testimonies, built cases, uncovered secrets that had been buried for years. And he found something even Gideon hadn't known about. Helena Crow had been financing the Blackmore brothers for 3 years, using her dead husband's money to bankroll land grabs, extortion, and worse. In exchange, they gave her a cut of the profits and eliminated anyone who threatened her social standing. It was a criminal empire disguised as high society, and Roe had the documents to prove it. He brought them to the hotel one evening and spread them across the table in Evelyn's room. "This is it," he said. "This is how we destroy them." Evelyn stared at the papers. Contracts. Ledgers. Letters written in Helena's elegant handwriting. "How did you get these?" she asked. One of Helena's partners got nervous and decided to save himself. He handed over everything in exchange for immunity. Gideon picked up one of the letters and read it, his expression darkening. She ordered the Blackmores to threaten Harvey, to make sure he stayed desperate enough to send Evelyn up the mountain. Evelyn's blood ran cold. "What?" "She was trying to manipulate me through you," Gideon said, his voice hard. "She thought if you went up there and I rejected you, Harvey would become even more desperate, more controllable. And then she'd swoop in to help him, use that as leverage to get to me. But you didn't reject her," Rose said. "You married her, and that ruined everything." Evelyn felt sick. "She's been orchestrating this from the beginning." "Yes, and now we have proof." Rose started gathering the documents. "I'm filing charges tomorrow. Helena, the Blackmores, Pike, all of them. And I'm requesting federal marshals to make the arrests." "Will they come?" Gideon asked. "They will when they see what I'm sending them," Rose smiled. "This isn't just about your marriage anymore. This is about corruption, extortion, land theft, and possibly murder. The Federals have been looking for an excuse to clean up this territory. We just handed them one." Evelyn sat down slowly. "What happens to us?" "You'll have to testify, both of you, and it won't be pleasant. Helena's lawyers will try to destroy you on the stand, make you look like a liar, a gold digger, whatever they can think of." "Let them try," Evelyn said. Roe looked at her with something like respect. "You've changed." "No, I just stopped pretending to be what everyone wanted me to be." "Good. Because the woman I met 3 weeks ago couldn't have survived what's coming. The woman sitting here now might actually win." But shamam. The federal marshals arrived 5 days later. They came quietly, in the early morning, before most of the town was awake. Evelyn watched from her hotel window as they moved through the streets, making arrests. First, they took the Blackmore brothers, dragging them out of their office in chains while a crowd gathered to watch. Then they arrested Sheriff Pike at his home, his face red with fury and humiliation. And finally, they went to Helena Crow's estate. She fought, screamed, demanded lawyers, threatened lawsuits, but the marshals didn't care. They handcuffed her in front of her own servants and led her through the streets of Black Hollow Ridge in shackles while the entire town watched. Helena's face was white, her hair disheveled, her expensive dress stained with mud. She looked broken, and Evelyn felt nothing but satisfaction. Gideon stood beside her at the window, watching. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like I can breathe for the first time in my life." "It's not over yet. The trial, I know, but this is enough. Seeing her like that, knowing she can't hurt anyone anymore, it's enough." Below, Helena was pushed into a wagon. She looked up at the hotel, and for a brief moment her eyes locked with Evelyn's. There was no hatred there anymore, just defeat. The wagon pulled away and the crowd slowly dispersed. Evelyn stepped back from the window and turned to face Gideon. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For believing me. For standing beside me. For not running when things got hard." Gideon's expression softened. "I told you I needed someone honest. You gave me that. This is just me returning the favor." "It's more than that." "Maybe." Evelyn took a breath. "Can I ask you something?" "Always. When this is all over, when the trial's done, and Helena and the Blackmores are in prison and everything goes back to normal,
What happens to us?
Gideon was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I don't know. I guess we figure that out together. Together. Yes. Evelyn nodded slowly. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't a promise of forever. But it was honest, and for now, that was enough. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The courtroom was packed every single day. People came from all over the territory to watch the spectacle, to see the mighty fall, to witness justice, or at least the territory's version of it. Evelyn testified for 6 hours. She stood in front of a room full of strangers and told them everything. About her father's fists, about the years of mockery, about climbing a mountain in a blizzard because she had no other choice. Helena's lawyer tried to break her. Isn't it true, Mrs. Vale, that you saw Mr. Vale's wealth as an opportunity? No. You expect this court to believe you married him out of, what, love? I married him because he was the first person who ever treated me like I mattered. How convenient, and how much has he given you since the marriage? New clothes, hotel rooms, medical care for your mother? Yes. So you did benefit financially. I benefited from not being beaten anymore. If that makes me a gold digger, then I guess I am one. The courtroom erupted in whispers. The lawyer's face went red. Your Honor. Move on, counselor, the judge said. But the damage was done. Evelyn had refused to be ashamed, and the jury saw it. Gideon testified next. He was calm, methodical, devastating. He laid out every threat the Blackmores had made, every bribe Pike had taken, every manipulation Helena had attempted. By the time Nathaniel Rowe finished presenting evidence, there was no question left. Helena Crowe, the Blackmore brothers, and Sheriff Darnell Pike were guilty. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Helena was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. The Blackmores got 20 each. Pike got 10. And Harvey Mercer, who'd tried to testify against Evelyn and failed miserably, was sentenced to 5 years for extortion and domestic abuse. When the judge's gavel fell, Evelyn closed her eyes. It was over. She'd won. They all had. Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed them, asking questions, taking photographs, wanting statements. Gideon ignored them all and guided Evelyn through the crowd to a waiting carriage. They rode back to the hotel in silence. When they arrived, Evelyn went straight to her mother's room. Margaret was sitting up in bed, looking healthier than she had in years. Dr. Henley's treatments had worked. The sickness hadn't disappeared, but it had stopped progressing. She might actually survive. You did it, Margaret whispered. Evelyn sat beside her and took her hand. We did it. No, baby. This was you. You stood up. You fought. You won. Evelyn felt tears burning in her eyes. I'm sorry it took me so long. Don't be. You did it when you were ready. That's all that matters. They sat together while the sun set outside, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. And for the first time in Evelyn's entire life, the future didn't look like a prison sentence. It looked like possibility. The weeks following the trial felt strange. Black Hollow Ridge didn't transform overnight into some kind of frontier paradise. The corrupt officials were gone, sure, but the people who'd supported them, who'd benefited from their crimes, were still there, still angry, still whispering. Evelyn felt their eyes on her every time she walked through town, but something had shifted inside her chest. She didn't apologize anymore when people stared, didn't lower her gaze when women whispered, didn't make herself small when men muttered insults just loud enough for her to hear. She just kept walking. Gideon noticed the change immediately. You're different, he said one morning as they sat in the hotel dining room having breakfast. Margaret was strong enough now to join them, though she still tired easily and spent most afternoons resting. Evelyn looked up from her eggs. Different how? Harder. In a good way. I don't feel harder. I just feel done. Done with what? Caring what they think. Evelyn set down her fork. I spent 26 years trying to make myself acceptable to people who were never going to accept me, and I'm tired of it. Let them hate me. At least now they have an actual reason. Margaret reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand. I'm proud of you, Evie. For what? Getting people thrown in prison? For standing up? For fighting? For showing this town that they can't break everyone? Gideon leaned back in his chair, his coffee cup cradled in both hands. Speaking of which, we need to talk about what happens next. Evelyn's stomach tightened. Next? The trial's over. Your mother's getting better. The people who wanted to hurt us are in prison. At some point, we need to decide what our life actually looks like. I thought we already decided. We're married. On paper, yes. But we've been living in a hotel for 2 months. We can't stay here forever. Evelyn hadn't thought about it, hadn't let herself think about it, because thinking about the future meant confronting the fact that she and Gideon were essentially strangers who happened to share a last name. What are you saying? She asked quietly. Gideon set down his cup. I'm saying we have options. I have the cabin up in the mountains. It's isolated, but it's home. Or we could stay in town. Buy a house. Try to build a normal life here. There's nothing normal about this life. No, but we could try. Margaret cleared her throat softly. I think I'll go rest. This conversation sounds like it's meant for the two of you. She stood slowly, and Evelyn started to help her, but Margaret waved her off. I'm fine, baby. You two talk. After Margaret left, Evelyn and Gideon sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Evelyn said, Do you want me to come to the mountains with you? I want you to do whatever makes you feel safe. That's not an answer. Gideon's jaw tightened. Yes, I want you to come with me, but not because I need a housekeeper or because the marriage certificate says you should. I want you to come because you want to be there. And if I don't know what I want, then we figure it out, together, like we've been doing. Evelyn looked down at her hands. They were rough from years of sewing, scarred from needle pricks and burns, working hands, survivor's hands. I've never had choices before, she said quietly. My whole life, someone else decided what I did, where I went, who I was. My father, this town, circumstances. And now you're asking me what I want, and I don't even know how to answer that question. Gideon leaned forward. Then start small. What do you want right now? Today? Evelyn thought about it. I want to stop living in a hotel room, she said finally. I want a place that feels like it's actually mine, not borrowed, not temporary. Mine. Okay, then let's find one. Just like that? Just like that? Evelyn met his eyes. You make it sound so simple. It is simple. You want something. We make it happen. The hard part is figuring out what you want in the first place. What do you want? Evelyn asked. Gideon was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I want to stop hiding. I've been up in those mountains for 7 years pretending the world doesn't exist, and I'm tired of it. I'm tired of being alone. I'm tired of living like a ghost. So stay here, in town. I don't know if I can. This place, he gestured vaguely toward the window. It reminds me of everything I lost. My wife, my son, the life I thought I'd have. Every street corner is a memory I don't want to revisit. Then we leave, Evelyn said. Both of us. Find somewhere new. Somewhere that doesn't have all these ghosts attached to it. Gideon looked at her with something like surprise. You'd do that? Why not? There's nothing keeping me here except my mother, and she's strong enough to travel now if we take it slow. We could go anywhere. Start over completely. That's a big decision. I know, but isn't that what we've been doing this whole time? Making big decisions and figuring out how to live with them? Gideon smiled. It was small and tired, but real. Yeah, he said. I guess we have. Okay. They spent the next week looking at properties. Not in Black Hollow Ridge, but in the surrounding territory. Small towns, ranches, homesteads that had been abandoned during the last harsh winter. Nothing felt right. Too isolated, too exposed, too expensive, too run down. Evelyn started to wonder if they were ever going to find something that worked. Then Nathaniel Rowe showed up at the hotel with a map and a proposition. I heard you're looking for property, he said, spreading the map across the table in Evelyn's room. Gideon frowned. How did you hear that? I'm a lawyer. I hear everything. Rowe tapped a spot on the map about 30 miles south of Black Hollow Ridge. There's a ranch here, 200 acres, good water, timber, a house that needs work but has solid bones. The owner died last year, and his children don't want it. They're selling cheap just to get rid of it. How cheap? Gideon asked. Rowe named a price. Gideon's eyebrows rose.
That's half what it should be worth. Like I said, they want it gone. No one else is buying because the ranch has a reputation. What kind of reputation? Evelyn asked. Roe hesitated. The owner's name was Thomas Brennan. He was not a good man, ran some shady operations, treated his workers like animals. When he died, most people figured it was karma catching up with him. So the land's cursed, Gideon said flatly.
The land's just land, but people around here are superstitious. They think bad luck follows bad men. Roe rolled up the map, which means you could buy a perfectly good ranch for a fraction of its value, fix it up, build something new on top of the old foundation. Gideon looked at Evelyn. What do you think? I think cursed land is probably cheaper than blessed land. Roe laughed. Smart woman. You want me to arrange a viewing? Yes, Evelyn said before Gideon could answer. Roe nodded. I'll set it up for tomorrow. After he left, Gideon turned to Evelyn. You sure about this? He asked. No, but I'm sure about something else. What's that? That I'm tired of letting other people's fears control my life. If the land's cursed, we'll uncurse it. If it's not, then we got a good deal. Either way, we're moving forward. Gideon studied her for a long moment. Then he said, When did you get so brave? I'm not brave, I'm just done being afraid. That's the same thing. No, it's not. Brave people aren't afraid. I'm terrified all the time. I just stopped letting the fear make my decisions for me. Gideon reached out and took her hand. It was the first time he'd touched her without a reason, without guiding her through a crowd or helping her into a carriage or steadying her when she stumbled. This was different. This was deliberate. Evelyn looked down at their joined hands, her heart hammering. I'm glad I married you, Gideon said quietly. Evelyn's throat tightened. Even though it's been nothing but trouble? Especially because of that, I've spent 7 years avoiding trouble, avoiding life, and you walked into it and dragged me back into the world whether I wanted to come or not. I didn't drag you anywhere. Yes, you did. And I'm grateful for it. He let go of her hand and stood. Get some rest, he said. We're leaving early tomorrow. After he left, Evelyn sat alone in the quiet room, staring at the hand he'd held. Something was changing between them, something she didn't have a name for yet, and for the first time in her life, that didn't scare her. Achasik. The Brennan Ranch sat in a valley surrounded by pine forests and backed by low mountains. The house was 2 stories, built from logs that had weathered gray over the years. Half the shutters hung crooked, the porch sagged on one side, the barn needed a new roof, but the bones were good. Evelyn could see it. She walked through the empty rooms while Gideon inspected the foundation, and Margaret sat on the porch in a chair they'd brought from the wagon. The house smelled like dust and abandonment, but underneath that was something else. Potential. The kitchen was large with a stone fireplace. The upstairs had 4 bedrooms. There was even a small room off the back that could be turned into a sewing space. Evelyn stood in the middle of what would be the main living area and tried to imagine furniture, rugs, curtains, a life. It wasn't hard. Gideon found her there 20 minutes later. What do you think? He asked. I think it's perfect. It needs a lot of work. So did we. That didn't stop us. Gideon smiled. Fair point. They walked outside together and stood on the sagging porch. Margaret was dozing in her chair, the afternoon sun warm on her face. We could build something here, Evelyn said quietly. Something that's actually ours. We could. It won't be easy. Nothing worth doing is. Evelyn looked at him. Are you quoting someone? Probably. I read a lot of books up in that cabin. What else did those books teach you? Gideon thought about it. That hiding from life doesn't make the pain go away. It just makes you miss the good parts, too. And are we the good parts? I think we could be. Evelyn's chest tightened. Okay, she said. Let's buy it. Yes. The paperwork took 2 weeks. During that time, Gideon hired workers to start repairs on the house. New roof on the barn, fixed porch, replaced shutters, patched holes. By the time they officially took ownership, the ranch was starting to look less like a haunted relic and more like a home. They moved in on a cold morning in late autumn. Margaret had her own room on the first floor so she wouldn't have to climb stairs. Evelyn and Gideon took separate rooms upstairs. They'd never discussed sleeping arrangements, and Evelyn was grateful for that. The idea of sharing a bed with Gideon still felt too complicated to navigate. The first night in the new house, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She lay in bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds, wind through the pines, the creak of settling wood, an owl somewhere in the distance. It should have been peaceful. Instead, it felt lonely. She finally gave up and went downstairs. Gideon was sitting by the fireplace, staring into the flames. He looked up when she entered. "Can't sleep?" "No. You?" "Haven't been able to sleep properly in 7 years. Not sure I remember how." Evelyn sat in the chair across from him. "Do you dream about them? Your wife and son?" Gideon was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Every night. Sometimes they're alive, sometimes they're dying. Sometimes I save them. Sometimes I watch them slip away and can't do anything to stop it." "That sounds awful." "It is. But it's also the only way I get to see them anymore, so I've learned to live with it." Evelyn pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Do you regret marrying me? Because you're still grieving them?" "No. Grief isn't something you stop feeling just because you move forward. It's something you carry. And having you here, it doesn't erase what I lost, but it makes the carrying easier." "I don't know how to be a wife," Evelyn said quietly. "I don't know what you need from me. I don't need anything from you. I just need you to be honest. That's all I've ever wanted. Even if the honesty isn't pretty, especially then." Evelyn looked into the fire. "I'm scared." "Of what?" "That I'm going to wake up and this whole thing will disappear. The house, the safety, you. That I'll be back in that shack with my father's fist coming toward my face and my mother dying in the next room. That's not going to happen." "You can't promise that." "No, but I can promise that if anything tries to hurt you again, it'll have to go through me first. And I'm a lot harder to get through than people think." Evelyn managed a small smile. "I've noticed." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Gideon said, "You asked me once what I wanted, after the trial, remember?" "Yes." "I've been thinking about it, and I think I finally have an answer." Evelyn's heart beat faster. "What is it?" Gideon looked at her across the firelight. "I want to stop feeling like a ghost," he said. "I want to be a person again, someone who does more than just survive. And I think you're the only person who's ever made me feel like that's possible." Evelyn's throat went tight. "I don't know how to do that for you," she whispered. "You're already doing it, just by being here, by not running away when things get hard, by fighting back when the world tries to break you." Gideon leaned forward. "You're the strongest person I've ever met, Evelyn. You just don't see it yet." "I'm not strong. I'm terrified all the time." "Strength isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done even when you're scared to death. You climbed a mountain in a blizzard. You stood up to an entire town. You testified in court and exposed the people who hurt you. If that's not strength, I don't know what is." Evelyn felt tears burning in her eyes. "Stop," she said. "You're going to make me cry." "Then cry. You've earned it." So she did, and Gideon sat across from her and let her fall apart without trying to fix it. Because sometimes that's what people needed. Not solutions, just witness. The first month at the ranch was harder than either of them expected. The house needed constant repairs. The barn roof leaked. One of the fences collapsed in a windstorm. Margaret caught a cold that scared them both until Dr. Henley came out from town and assured them it was just a cold, not the consumption flaring up again. Evelyn learned how to cook on the temperamental kitchen stove, how to preserve food for winter, how to mend fences and haul water and chop wood when Gideon was busy with other work. Her hands blistered, her back ached. She fell into bed every night exhausted. But she was happy. It was a strange kind of happiness, not the bright, shining kind from storybooks, more like a quiet contentment, the feeling of building something real with her own hands. Gideon worked from dawn to dusk, repairing everything the previous owner had let fall apart. He hired a few hands from town to help with the heaviest work, but mostly he did it himself. Evelyn would watch him sometimes from the kitchen window, watch the way he moved, methodical and precise, like everything he did had purpose. They fell into a rhythm. Breakfast together, work through the day, dinner by the fire, conversation that got easier with each passing week. They still slept in separate rooms. Neither of them mentioned it. But Evelyn was starting to wonder if that would change, if she wanted it to change. 2 months after they moved in, trouble found them again. It started with missing livestock. One of the ranch hands came to the house early one morning, his face grim. "Mr. Vale," he said, "we're missing 3 head of cattle, found tracks leading east toward the timber." Gideon's expression darkened. "Wolves?" "No, sir. Boot prints. Someone drove them off during the night." Evelyn felt ice slide down her spine. "Rustlers?" she asked. The ranch hand nodded. "Looks like it." Gideon was already reaching for his rifle. "How many?" "Can't tell for sure. At least 2, maybe more." "Round up the other men. We're tracking them." "Gideon," Evelyn started. He turned to her, his expression hard. "Stay here. Keep the doors locked. If anyone comes to the house who isn't me or one of our men, you shoot first and ask questions later." "I don't know how to shoot." Gideon walked to the cabinet and pulled out a revolver. He checked the chamber, then handed it to her. "Point. Pull the trigger. It's not complicated." Evelyn took the gun with shaking hands. It was heavier than she expected. "I don't want you to go," she said quietly. "I know, but I'm not letting thieves steal from us. We worked too hard for this." He kissed her forehead, quick and rough, then was gone. Evelyn stood in the kitchen holding the revolver, her heart pounding. Margaret appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a blanket. "What's happening?" she asked. "Rustlers took some cattle. Gideon went after them." Margaret's face went pale. "That's dangerous." "I know. You should have stopped him." "You think I didn't try?" They waited. Hours crawled by. Evelyn tried to work, mending clothes, preparing food, anything to keep her hands busy, but her mind kept circling back to Gideon out there in the woods with thieves who wouldn't hesitate to kill him if they got the chance. Finally, as the sun started to sink behind the mountains, she heard hoofbeats. Evelyn grabbed the revolver and ran to the window. It was Gideon. He was alone. She threw open the door and ran out to meet him. "What happened? Where are the others?" Gideon dismounted, his face grim. "They're bringing the cattle back. We found them about 5 miles east, 3 men. They ran when they saw us coming." "Did you catch them?" "No, but we got a good look at them. I recognized one, Jacob Stern. Works for the Miller Ranch about 20 miles south." "Why would he steal from us?" Gideon's jaw tightened. "Because Thomas Brennan stole from everyone around here. And now that he's dead, they figure they're owed payback. Doesn't matter that we're the new owners. We bought Brennan's sins along with his land." Evelyn felt her stomach drop. "So this is going to keep happening. Probably. Until I make it clear that we're not the Brennans. That we won't tolerate theft or harassment." "And how do you do that?" Gideon looked at her with those hard, tired eyes. "I go talk to Miller. Make sure he understands that if his men come onto our land again, there's going to be trouble." "That sounds like a threat." "It is a threat." "Gideon, I'm not letting them run us off this land, Evelyn. We fought too hard to get here. If I have to be the monster they're expecting, then that's what I'll be." Evelyn stepped closer. "You're not a monster. You don't know what I'm capable of." "Yes, I do, and it doesn't scare me." Gideon stared at her. Then he reached out and cupped her face in his rough, calloused hand. "It should," he said quietly. But he didn't pull away, and neither did she. The next morning, Gideon rode to the Miller Ranch with 2 of his men. Evelyn watched him go, her stomach twisted into knots. Margaret sat beside her on the porch. "He'll be fine," she said. "You don't know that." "No, but I know he's survived worse than a conversation with angry ranchers." Evelyn looked at her mother. "When did you get so calm about everything?" Margaret smiled. "When I stopped dying. It gives you a different perspective on what's worth worrying about." "And Gideon riding into danger isn't worth worrying about?" "Of course it is, but worrying won't change anything. All you can do is trust that he knows what he's doing." "What if he doesn't?" "Then you'll figure out how to fix it, together, like you've been doing." Evelyn wanted to believe that. She just wasn't sure she could. Oshiikian. Gideon came back that evening, unharmed but tense. "How did it go?" Evelyn asked. "Miller claims he didn't know his men were rustling. Says he'll keep them in line from now on." "Do you believe him?" "No, but I made it clear what would happen if it continues. So either he gets the message or we deal with it when it happens again." "And if it happens again?"
Gideon's expression went hard. Then I stopped being polite. Evelyn didn't ask what that meant. She was afraid she already knew.
That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. She kept thinking about the revolver Gideon had given her, about the weight of it in her hands, about the fact that she might actually have to use it someday. This was the life she'd chosen. Not safe, not easy, not anything like what she'd imagined. But it was hers, and she wasn't going to let anyone take it away. Mends. The rustling stopped, for a while at least. Winter came hard and fast, burying the ranch in snow. Evelyn and Gideon spent most of their days inside, maintaining the house and caring for the animals they'd brought into the barn to keep them from freezing. It was during those long, dark months that something shifted between them. They started spending evenings together by the fire, not out of obligation, but because the silence felt less lonely when they shared it. Gideon taught Evelyn how to shoot. They'd go out into the snow with targets set up against hay bales, and he'd stand behind her, adjusting her stance, guiding her aim. Evelyn tried not to notice how close he stood, tried not to think about the way his hands felt on her shoulders, tried not to wonder what it would be like if he touched her for reasons that had nothing to do with survival or protection. One night, after Margaret had gone to bed, Evelyn found herself asking the question she'd been avoiding for months. "Do you still love her, your wife?" Gideon looked up from the book he'd been reading. "Yes," he said simply. Evelyn's chest tightened. "Will you always?" "Probably. But that doesn't mean there's no room for anything else." "What does that mean?" Gideon set down his book and leaned forward. "It means I loved her, and I'll always love her. But she's gone, and I'm still here, and so are you." "I don't want to be a replacement," Evelyn said quietly. "You're not. You're something completely different." "What am I?" Gideon stood and crossed the room. He knelt in front of her chair, his eyes level with hers. "You're the first person in 7 years who made me want to stop hiding," he said. "You're the woman who climbed a mountain to save her mother, who stood up to an entire town, who looks at me like I'm a person instead of a ghost. You're not a replacement for anything. You're just you. And that's enough." Evelyn's breath caught. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "Neither do I, but we'll figure it out." He reached up and brushed a strand of hair from her face, and for the first time since they'd met, Evelyn leaned forward and kissed him. It wasn't passionate, it wasn't desperate, it was careful, tentative. Two broken people trying to find something whole. When they pulled apart, Gideon rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me," he said quietly. "Not in the other room. Here. With me." Evelyn's heart pounded. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." So she stayed. And for the first time in her life, Evelyn Mercer fell asleep in the arms of someone who wanted her there. Not because of obligation, not because of necessity, but because of something neither of them had expected to find. Something that felt an awful lot like love. Morning came slowly through the frost-covered windows, painting the bedroom in shades of gray and pale gold. Evelyn woke to the unfamiliar weight of Gideon's arm across her waist, his breath warm against the back of her neck. For a moment, panic seized her chest. This was too intimate, too real, too much. But then she forced herself to breathe and remember. This was what she'd chosen. Not just the marriage certificate, or the ranch, or the fight against Helena Crow. This. A life with someone who'd seen her at her worst and stayed anyway. Gideon stirred behind her. "You awake?" "Yes." "Regretting last night?" Evelyn turned to face him. His hair was messy, his eyes still heavy with sleep. He looked younger like this, less like the hardened mountain ghost and more like the man he might have been if grief hadn't carved him hollow. "No," she said. "Are you?" "Not even a little bit." Relief flooded through her. "Good, because I don't know how to do this, and if you started regretting it right away, I'd probably run back to my own room and never come out." Gideon smiled. Actually smiled. "Running isn't really your style anymore." "I'm working on it." He reached out and traced his thumb along her jawline. The gesture was so tender it made her throat tight. "We don't have to figure everything out today," he said quietly. "We can take this slow, see where it goes." "I've never been good at slow." "Neither have I, but
I'm willing to try if you are. Evelyn nodded. They lay there in comfortable silence until they heard Margaret moving around downstairs, followed by the clatter of pots in the kitchen. I should help her with breakfast, Evelyn said. In a minute. Gideon pulled her closer. Just stay here a little longer. So she did.
And for the first time in her life, Evelyn understood what it meant to feel wanted, not because she was useful or convenient or desperate, but simply because someone enjoyed having her near. It was terrifying and wonderful and completely new. Winter deepened its grip on the territory. Snow piled higher. Temperatures dropped so low that water froze in the well overnight. The ranch became an island of warmth and flickering lamplight surrounded by endless white. Evelyn and Gideon settled into a routine that felt almost domestic. They worked together during the day, feeding animals, repairing equipment, chopping enough wood to keep the fires burning. At night, they sat with Margaret and talked or read or simply existed in the same space without needing to fill every silence. And when Margaret went to bed, they went upstairs together. Sometimes they made love, awkward and fumbling at first, two people learning each other's bodies and boundaries. Sometimes they just held each other while the wind howled outside. Evelyn was surprised by how much she liked the holding. She'd spent her whole life being touched in violence or necessity, her father's fists, her mother's desperate clutching, customers handing her torn fabric to mend. But Gideon's hands were different. They asked permission. They offered comfort. They made her feel safe instead of afraid. "Can I ask you something?" she said one night as they lay tangled together under thick quilts. "Always." "Do you still dream about them, your wife and son?" Gideon was quiet for a long moment. "Yes," he said finally, "but less often now. And when I do, they're not always dying anymore. Sometimes I dream about good days, memories I'd forgotten, Thomas learning to walk, Sarah laughing at something stupid I said, things that don't hurt quite as much. Do you think they'd be angry that you moved on? I used to worry about that. Thought I was betraying them by even thinking about being happy again. But I don't think that's how love works. Real love doesn't demand you stay broken forever. It wants you to heal, to find joy again, even if it looks different than before." Evelyn pressed her face against his chest. "I never knew my father when he wasn't cruel. Never saw him be kind to my mother or anyone else. So I don't know what real love looks like. I'm probably going to get it wrong a lot." "Then we'll get it wrong together. You make it sound easy." "It's not easy, but it's worth doing anyway." Evelyn lifted her head to look at him. "How did you get so wise?" "Years of making terrible decisions and learning from them." Gideon brushed hair from her face. "Plus all those books I read while hiding in the mountains. Turns out philosophy is useful for something besides putting you to sleep." She laughed. It felt good to laugh. She'd spent so many years choking on fear and shame that laughter felt like a foreign language she was only now learning to speak. "I love you," she said suddenly. The words surprised her as much as they surprised him. Gideon went still. "You don't have to say that just because—" "I'm not. I mean it. I love you. Not because you saved me or because you give me things or because I'm supposed to. I love you because you're the first person who ever made me feel like I was worth something. And I don't know if I'm saying it right or if it's too soon or if you even want to hear it, but it's true." Gideon's eyes went bright with something that might have been tears. "I love you too," he said roughly. "I didn't think I could. Didn't think I had anything left to give. But you proved me wrong. About a lot of things." Evelyn kissed him. And this time, there was nothing careful or tentative about it. This was two people choosing each other, fully, completely, without reservation. Outside, the wind screamed and snow fell like the world was ending. Inside, two broken people found a way to be whole together. Spring came late that year. When it finally arrived, it came with a violence that matched everything else about the territory. The snow melted fast, turning creeks into rivers and roads into mud. Animals emerged from winter dens, hungry and desperate. The ranch came alive with work that needed doing: fences to repair, fields to plow, livestock to tend. Margaret had gained enough strength to help with lighter tasks. She still tired easily, and the consumption was still there, lurking in her lungs like a sleeping predator. But Dr. Henley's treatments had given her something she hadn't had in years: time. I want to plant a garden, she announced one morning at breakfast. Evelyn looked up from her eggs. A garden? Vegetables, herbs, maybe some flowers. I've spent the last 3 years watching myself die. I'd like to spend this spring watching something grow. Gideon nodded. There's good soil on the south side of the house. Gets plenty of sun. We can clear it this week. I'll help, Evelyn said. No, you won't, Margaret said firmly. You've got enough to do. This is for me. Something I can take care of. Make me feel useful instead of like an invalid you're both tiptoeing around. Evelyn started to protest, but Gideon caught her eye and shook his head slightly. All right, Mama, Evelyn said. It's your garden. Margaret smiled. It was the first real smile Evelyn had seen on her mother's face in years. Over the next week, Margaret threw herself into the project with an energy that shocked both of them. She planned rows and chose seeds and spent hours in the dirt, her hands covered in soil, her face bright with purpose. She's happy, Gideon observed one evening as they watched Margaret through the kitchen window. I know. It scares me. Why? Because I keep waiting for it to be taken away, for her to get sick again, for something terrible to happen and destroy this. Gideon turned her to face him. You can't live like that, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Sometimes good things just happen and they stay good. That hasn't been my experience. Then maybe it's time for a new experience. Evelyn wanted to believe him, but old habits died hard. The trouble came in mid-spring, just when Evelyn was starting to let her guard down. A rider arrived at the ranch one morning with a letter from Nathaniel Rowe. Evelyn's hands shook as she opened it. The letter was brief and direct, the way Rowe always was. Mrs. Vale, I thought you should know that your father is being released from prison early due to overcrowding. He'll be out within the week. I've arranged for a restraining order, but enforcement in the territory is unreliable at best. Take precautions. Rowe Evelyn read it twice, then handed it to Gideon. His face went hard. When? Within the week. Then we prepare. For what? He can't hurt me anymore? The restraining order? Is a piece of paper, Gideon interrupted. Your father doesn't care about legal documents. If he wants to come after you, he will. And I'm not going to let that happen. What are you going to do? Gideon's jaw tightened. Whatever I have to. That night he rode into town and came back with more ammunition and an extra rifle. He taught Evelyn how to load and fire it properly, not just the revolver. He positioned the ranch hands to watch the roads. He barely slept. Evelyn watched him transform back into the war scout he used to be. Alert, calculating, dangerous. You don't have to do this, she said one night. We could just leave. Go somewhere he'd never find us. No. We fought for this place. We're not running. It's just land, Gideon. It's not just land. It's proof that we survived, that we built something good out of all the bad things that happened, and I'll be damned if I let a drunk coward take that away from us. Evelyn understood. This wasn't really about the ranch. It was about refusing to be victims anymore. Harvey Mercer showed up on a Tuesday morning. Evelyn was in the garden with Margaret when she heard the hoofbeats. She looked up to see her father riding toward the house, his face already red with rage or drink or both. Get inside, Chis, Evelyn said to her mother. Evie, now mama, please. Margaret hurried toward the house while Evelyn stood her ground, her heart hammering. Harvey dismounted and stumbled slightly, definitely drunk. There you are, he slurred, my ungrateful daughter, living in a fancy house while your old man rots in prison. You earned that prison sentence. I earned it? I earned it? Harvey's voice rose. I gave you life, raised you, and this is how you repay me? By testifying against me? By sending me away? You beat me for 26 years, Evelyn said, her voice steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. You threatened my mother. You tried to sell me like cattle. You deserve worse than prison. Harvey's face went purple. You little... That's when Gideon appeared. He'd been working in the barn, but he must have heard Harvey's voice because now he stood between Evelyn and her father, rifle in hand. You need to leave, Gideon said quietly. This is between me and my daughter. No. This is between you and a restraining order. You're not supposed to be within 100 yards of her, so turn around and leave before I make you. Harvey laughed. It was an ugly, bitter sound. You think you scare me? You think because you got money and land that you're better than me? I don't think I'm better than you, Gideon said. I know I am, because I've never beaten a woman, never threatened a sick person, never sold my own child to pay gambling debts. Now get off my property. Or what? You'll shoot me? Go ahead. Let everyone see what kind of man you really are. A murderer. Gideon fired. The bullet hit the ground 2 inches from Harvey's foot, spraying dirt. Harvey jumped back with a yelp. Next one goes through your knee, Gideon said calmly. The one after that through your chest. Your choice. Harvey stared at him, all the fight draining out of his face. Then he scrambled back onto his horse and rode away, cursing and shouting threats that grew fainter as he disappeared down the road. Evelyn's legs went weak. She sat down hard on the ground. Gideon set down the rifle and crouched beside her. You all right? He asked. I thought you were going to kill him. I considered it. Why didn't you? Because he's not worth it, and because you deserve better than watching your father die in the dirt. Evelyn looked at him. I wouldn't have blamed you if you did. I know, but I'm trying to be better than the man I used to be. The one who solved every problem with violence, and you make me want to try harder. Evelyn threw her arms around him and held on tight. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For protecting me. For not killing him. For being here. Gideon held her while she shook, one hand stroking her hair. He's not coming back, he said quietly. I made sure he understood that. How can you be sure? Because I know men like him. They're cowards at heart. They only pick fights they can win, and he knows now that coming after you means going through me. He won't risk it. Evelyn wanted to believe that, and this time she actually did. Baumag. Summer arrived with heat that baked the valley and turned Margaret's garden into a riot of green. Vegetables grew faster than they could harvest them. The ranch flourished. The cattle multiplied. The repairs they'd made through winter held strong. Evelyn fell into the rhythm of the land. Up at dawn, work through the day, evenings spent with her family around the dinner table or on the porch watching the sunset behind the mountains. It was a simple life, nothing like the drama and danger of the previous year. And it was exactly what she needed. One evening in late July, Gideon found her sitting on the porch alone, watching fireflies dance in the darkness. Margaret's asleep already? He asked. Yes. She wore herself out in the garden today, insisted on weeding the entire vegetable patch by herself. Gideon sat beside her. She's doing well. Better than well. Dr. Henley says her lungs have stabilized. The consumption's still there, but it's not progressing. She might have years left instead of months. That's good. It's a miracle is what it is. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds, crickets and distant coyotes, and the soft rustle of wind through grass. I have something to tell you, Evelyn said. Gideon turned to look at her. What is it? I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air between them. Gideon went very still. You're sure? I've missed 2 cycles, and I've been sick every morning for the past week. So yes, I'm fairly sure. How do you feel about it? Evelyn took a breath. Terrified. I don't know how to be a mother. I barely know how to be a wife. What if I'm terrible at it? What if I end up like my father, hurting the people I'm supposed to protect? You won't. How can you be so sure? Gideon took her hand. Because you've spent your entire life fighting to protect the people you love. Your mother, yourself. Now you'll fight to protect this child. It's what you do, who you are. What if that's not enough? Then we'll figure it out, together, like everything else. Evelyn looked at their joined hands. Are you scared? Terrified. I lost 1 child already. The thought of going through that again. His voice cracked. But I'm also more hopeful than I've been in 7 years. Because this time, I'm not doing it alone. You're here, and you're stronger than anyone I've ever met. I don't feel strong. You climbed a mountain in a blizzard, stood up to a criminal empire, built a life from nothing. You're the strongest person I know, Evelyn, and you're going to be an incredible mother. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. I hope you're right. I am. And even when I'm not, we'll still figure it out. She leaned against him, and they sat together watching the fireflies until the stars came out in full force. Ichus. The pregnancy was hard. Evelyn was sick constantly through the first few months. Food tasted wrong. Smells made her nauseous. Her body felt foreign and uncomfortable. But Margaret was there, steady and knowing, guiding her through it with the kind of practical wisdom that only came from experience. And Gideon was patient in ways she hadn't expected. He held her hair when she vomited, brought her tea that helped settle her stomach, never complained when she was too exhausted or uncomfortable to do much of anything. By autumn, the worst of the sickness had passed, and Evelyn's belly started to show. She stood in front of the mirror one morning, studying her changing shape. "You're beautiful," Gideon said from the doorway. "I look like I swallowed a watermelon." "A beautiful watermelon." Evelyn laughed despite herself. "That doesn't make sense." "Neither does half the stuff that comes out of my mouth. You know that by now." He crossed the room and put his arms around her, his hands resting on her belly. "I felt the baby move yesterday," she said quietly. "What did it feel like?" "Like butterfly wings. Or bubbles. Something fluttering inside me." "That's our child," Gideon said, wonder in his voice. "A whole person we made together." "Are you ready for this?" "No, but I don't think anyone's ever really ready. You just do your best and hope it's enough." Evelyn turned in his arms to face him. "I'm glad I married you. Even though it's been nothing but chaos and danger and hard work, especially because of that. I spent 26 years being nothing. Now I'm someone's wife, someone's daughter, and soon I'll be someone's mother. That's more than I ever thought I'd have." Gideon kissed her forehead. "You were never nothing, Evelyn. You were just surrounded by people too blind to see what was right in front of them. And you saw it? Eventually. Took me a while. But once I did, I couldn't unsee it." They stood together in the quiet bedroom, holding each other while sunlight streamed through the windows and their child moved between them. The baby came in early spring. Labor lasted 14 hours. Evelyn screamed until her throat was raw. Margaret held one hand while Gideon held the other, both of them coaching her through contractions that felt like being torn apart from the inside. Dr. Henley delivered the baby, a girl with Gideon's dark hair and lungs that worked perfectly from her first furious cry. "She's healthy," Henley said, wrapping the baby in a clean blanket. "Strong. You did well, Mrs. Vale." Evelyn was too exhausted to respond. She just held out her arms. The doctor placed the baby in them, and Evelyn looked down at the tiny red-faced creature she and Gideon had created. "Hello," she whispered. The baby stopped crying and stared up at her with unfocused eyes. Gideon sat on the edge of the bed, his face wet with tears he wasn't trying to hide. "What should we name her?" Evelyn asked. Gideon was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Hope. Her name is Hope. After what we found together? After what you gave me when I'd lost it completely." Evelyn looked at their daughter, at Hope, and felt something settle deep in her chest. This was what she'd been fighting for all along. Not just survival, not just escape. This. A life worth living, a family worth protecting, a future worth believing in. The years that followed weren't easy. Hope was a difficult baby, colicky and restless and demanding. Evelyn spent countless nights walking the floor, trying to soothe her while exhaustion dragged at her bones. The ranch continued to require constant work. Fences broke. Animals got sick. Droughts came and went. There were good years and bad years, times of plenty and times when they scraped by on grit and determination. Margaret's health had its ups and downs. Some months she was strong enough to work in her garden and help with Hope. Other months the consumption flared up and left her bedridden and gasping. But she was still alive, still fighting, still there. Harvey Mercer tried to come back once, 2 years after Hope was born. He showed up drunk and belligerent, demanding to see his granddaughter. Gideon met him at the property line with a rifle and a promise. "You step 1 foot on this land and I will end you. No warning, no second chances. Are we clear?" Harvey looked at Gideon's face and saw the truth there. He never came back. Helena Crow died in prison 3 years into her sentence. Pneumonia, the newspapers said. No one from Black Hollow Ridge attended her funeral. Her estate was sold off to pay her debts, and within a year, it was like she'd never existed at all. The Blackmore brothers and Sheriff Pike served their full sentences. When they were finally released, they left the territory and were never heard from again. Black Hollow Ridge itself changed slowly. New people moved in. Honest businesses replaced corrupt ones. The town grew and prospered, and eventually people stopped talking about the scandal of Gideon Vale marrying Big Evie. Not because they forgot, but because the woman they'd called Big Evie was gone. In her place was Evelyn Vale, rancher, mother, survivor. Someone who didn't apologize for existing. Someone who stood her ground. Someone who'd walked through fire and come out stronger on the other side. 5 years after Hope was born, Evelyn stood on the porch of their ranch house watching the sun set behind the mountains. Hope was playing in the yard, chasing chickens and shrieking with laughter. Margaret sat in a rocking chair nearby, wrapped in a blanket despite the warm evening, smiling at her granddaughter's antics. Gideon came up behind Evelyn and wrapped his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How different everything is from what I expected. Good different or bad different?" "Just different. 5 years ago, I thought I'd die in that shack with my father's fists and my mother's coughing and nothing else. I never imagined this. Any of this. Regret it? Not for a second." Hope ran up to the porch, her face flushed and her hair wild. "Mama, watch this!" She attempted a cartwheel and ended up in a heap on the ground. "That was perfect," Evelyn said seriously. "It was terrible," Hope said, laughing. "But I'll get better." "Yes, you will." Hope ran back to her game while Evelyn watched with something that felt suspiciously like contentment. "You're a good mother," Gideon said quietly. "I'm a mess of a mother. I lose my patience. I make mistakes. I have no idea what I'm doing half the time. That's what makes you good. You're trying. You're present. You love her without conditions. That's all anyone needs." Evelyn turned in his arms. "And what about you? Are you happy?" Gideon thought about it. Then he said, "I spent 7 years convinced happiness was something I'd lost forever, that the best I could hope for was survival. But you proved me wrong about that and everything else. So yes, I'm happy. More than I ever thought I'd be again. Even with all the chaos and hard work and sleepless nights, especially because of that, life isn't supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be real. And this," he gestured at Hope, at Margaret, at the ranch around them, "this is the most real thing I've ever had." Evelyn kissed him. After all these years, it still felt new, still felt like coming home. That night, after Hope was asleep, and Margaret had retired to her room, Evelyn and Gideon sat on the porch together, watching stars scatter across the black sky. "Do you ever think about how close we came to never meeting?" Evelyn asked. "All the time. If I hadn't fixed your boot that day, if I hadn't slipped on that broken board, if Helena hadn't been so determined to manipulate you, if your father hadn't been such a bastard." They fell silent, contemplating the chain of terrible circumstances that had somehow led to something good. "I used to think I was cursed," Evelyn said quietly, "that I was born wrong somehow, too big, too plain, too everything that women aren't supposed to be, and that's why nothing good ever happened to me. And now? Now I think maybe I wasn't cursed. I was just waiting for the right moment, the right person, the right fight that would force me to stop apologizing for existing and start demanding the life I deserved." Gideon took her hand. "You deserved it all along. You just needed to believe it yourself. I'm still working on that part. We all are, every day. That's the point. That's the..." Evelyn leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat together in comfortable silence while the night deepened around them. Inside the house, Hope whimpered in her sleep. Evelyn started to get up, but the sound faded as quickly as it had come. Just a dream. Nothing dangerous. "She's going to be strong like you," Gideon said. "I hope so. But I also hope she's kinder than I am, less angry, less scarred. The scars make you who you are. Don't wish them away." "I don't wish them away. I just wish she doesn't have to earn hers the way I did." "She won't, because she has parents who love her, who'll protect her, who'll teach her she's worth fighting for. That's more than either of us had." Evelyn nodded. It was true. Whatever mistakes they made as parents, and they'd make plenty, they would never make their daughter feel worthless, never make her apologize for taking up space, never make her believe she deserved cruelty. That alone broke the cycle. That alone was enough. Most up to my time. The world kept turning. Seasons changed. Hope grew. The ranch prospered. Margaret's health stabilized into something manageable. Evelyn and Gideon grew older together, their bodies marked by work and weather and time. There were hard days. Days when the old fears resurfaced. When Evelyn woke up convinced this was all a dream and she'd find herself back in that shack with bruises blooming on her ribs. Days when Gideon's grief over his first family crashed over him like a wave and left him hollow-eyed and silent. Days when Margaret's coughing grew so bad they were certain this was finally the end. Days when Hope threw tantrums or got sick or did the reckless things children do that aged their parents a decade in an afternoon. But there were good days too. Days when the three of them, Evelyn, Gideon, and Hope, rode out to check the fences and ended up having a picnic in a meadow instead. Days when Margaret's garden produced more vegetables than they could possibly eat, and they spent evenings preserving food for winter while laughing about nothing. Days when neighbors stopped by just to visit, not because they wanted something or had gossip to spread, but because they genuinely enjoyed the company. Days when Evelyn looked around and realized she had friends. People who respected her, a place in the community she'd earned through hard work and honesty. Those days outnumbered the hard ones, and that made all the difference. 10 years after Hope was born, Gideon surprised Evelyn with a ring. A real wedding ring, not the plain band they'd gotten at the courthouse in a rush all those years ago. This one had a small diamond set in silver, nothing ostentatious but beautiful in its simplicity. "What's this for?" Evelyn asked, turning it in the lamplight. "Because I never properly proposed, never asked you to marry me for the right reasons, and I wanted to fix that." "Gideon, we've been married for over a decade. We have a daughter. I think we're past proposals." "Humor me." He got down on one knee in the middle of their kitchen, his joints creaking in protest. Hope, now 10 years old and far too clever for her own good, giggled from the doorway. "Papa's being dramatic again." "Hush," Margaret said, pulling Hope back. "Let them have their moment." Gideon cleared his throat. "Evelyn Vale, you climbed a mountain to save your mother. You married a stranger to escape a monster. You stood up to criminals and bullies in an entire town that wanted you broken. You built a life with me when neither of us knew what we were doing. You gave me a daughter, gave me hope when I'd lost it, gave me a reason to stop hiding and start living. So I'm asking you now, will you marry me? Not because you have to, not because you're desperate or afraid, but because you want to. Because you choose this life we built together." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you again, always." Gideon stood and slipped the ring onto her finger. Hope cheered. Margaret wiped her eyes, and Evelyn kissed her husband while their daughter danced around them, and their whole imperfect, hard-won life spread out before them like a promise. Years continued to pass. Margaret finally succumbed to the consumption when Hope was 15. She went peacefully in her sleep, in her own bed, surrounded by family. They buried her on a hill overlooking her garden, where she could watch over the things she'd grown. Hope left for school in the city when she turned 18. It nearly killed Evelyn to watch her go, but she understood. The girl needed to see the world beyond the ranch, needed to choose her own path instead of having it chosen for her. "She'll come back," Gideon said as they watched the stagecoach carry their daughter away. "How do you know?" "Because we taught her she has a home worth coming back to." He was right. Hope returned every summer and eventually brought home a young man she'd met at school, a kind, quiet person who reminded Evelyn of Gideon when she'd first met him. Someone with shadows in his past, but hope for the future. They got married on the ranch, and Evelyn stood beside her daughter with tears streaming down her face, while Hope promised to love and honor someone who'd chosen her freely. The cycle, broken and remade into something better. Gideon died when he was 68, a heart attack while fixing a fence. Quick, painless. The way he would have wanted if he'd had a choice. Evelyn held him while the life drained from his eyes, whispering that she loved him, that he'd given her everything, that she'd be okay. The last thing he said was, "You were never nothing." Then he was gone, and Evelyn was alone again, but not the same kind of alone she'd been before. This time she had a daughter who came home immediately and stayed for weeks. Grandchildren who climbed into her lap and asked questions about the grandfather they'd barely known. friends who brought food and sat with her in silence when words failed. This time, she had a life full of people who loved her, who saw her, who knew her worth, and that made the grief bearable. Evelyn lived another 15 years after Gideon died. She stayed on the ranch, kept it running with help from Hope and her family. She turned Margaret's garden into something even bigger and more beautiful. She taught her grandchildren how to shoot and sew and stand up for themselves when the world tried to push them down. And when she finally died at 83, peacefully in her sleep, she left behind something that would have seemed impossible when she was that frightened 26-year-old woman kneeling in the dirt to fix a stranger's boot. She left behind a legacy, not of wealth or fame or power, but of survival, of transformation, of a woman who refused to stay broken. At her funeral, Hope stood before a packed church and told the story of her mother's life. Not the sanitized version, the real one, with all its ugliness and violence and hard-won victories. "My mother was told her whole life that she was worthless," Hope said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "That she was too big, too plain, too much of everything women aren't supposed to be. And for years she believed it. She made herself small. She apologized for existing. She survived by becoming invisible. But then she met my father, and something changed. Not because he saved her, though he helped. Not because he gave her money or status or safety, though he did all those things. But because he saw her, really saw her, and that recognition gave her permission to see herself. My mother wasn't a saint. She was angry and scared and scarred. She made mistakes. She struggled. She had days when the old fears came back and paralyzed her. But she kept fighting. She kept showing up. She kept choosing to be more than what the world told her she could be. And that's the lesson I hope we all take from her life. That it's never too late to stop apologizing, never too late to stand up, never too late to demand the life you deserve, even when everyone around you says you don't deserve anything. My mother was called Big Evie, worthless, unmarriageable, a charity case. But the woman I knew was Evelyn Vale, wife, mother, rancher, survivor, fighter. And she was worth everything. The church was silent. Then someone in the back started clapping. Then another. Then the whole building erupted in applause for a woman who'd spent the first half of her life being mocked, and the second half proving every single one of her critics wrong. They buried Evelyn beside Gideon on the ranch they'd built together, overlooking the valley where they'd found each other and learned what it meant to be whole. And if you visit that place today, you'll find their graves side by side, marked with simple stones. On Evelyn's, just 3 words. She was enough. Because in the end, that's all any of us need to be. Enough for ourselves, enough for the people who love us, enough to have mattered. Evelyn Mercer was never nothing. She just needed someone to remind her of that. And once she remembered, she became unstoppable.